a peaceful small town in the Buenos Aires countryside, General Las Heras, where everyone knew each other. Every road was familiar, and the friendship between two women seemed unbreakable. Carola Bruzone and Silvia Luna were once as close as sisters, working together in the same restaurant, sharing secrets, joys and sorrows. But in the closed world of relationships intertwined with love, jealousy, and envy, a small crack can turn into an abyss. Just a week before the wedding, Silvia was dragged into crisis when a scandalous video spread throughout the town. Suspicion fell on Carola, her best friend, and the friendship immediately collapsed, giving way to hatred. On April 16, 2010, right where they used to work and laugh, a swing of a meat pounder started an irreversible tragedy. From then on, General Las Heras was no longer peaceful. The town's name was associated with a shocking case, a story of friendship turned to enmity, and a death born of jealousy, secrets, and betrayal. Located in a small town in the province of Buenos Aires, Argentina, General Las Heras is a peaceful place. Life revolves around familiar streets, voies, and relationships. There, two women, Carola Bruzone and Silvia Luna, meet and become friends. They met at work, and their friendship lasted at least 5 years. Their relationship is both deep and complex. Carola, wife of Sergio Ricardo Robledo, has a son named Augustine, born in 1991. At the age of 38, she works as a chef at a local restaurant. Silvia works as a waitress at the same restaurant. She was previously married to Neto Antello and has 2 children, but the marriage fell apart after her affair was exposed. Carola and Silvia's friendship goes beyond work. They regularly go out on nights out, have family gatherings, and share secrets. Some people thought they were inseparable, while others saw underlying tensions. The relationship seems to ebb and flow between closeness and conflict, arguments that are quickly reconciled as if they were a familiar part of how they are together. By early 2010, Silvia's life seemed to be back on track. She had been with Juan for several years, and they were planning a wedding on April 24. Words spread around town. Invitations were printed. Preparations were underway. However, just a week before the wedding, a scandal broke out. A video and audio recording of Silvia being intimate with someone other than her fiancé began circulating on mobile phones. The source of the recording was unclear, but in Silvia's mind, suspicion fell on Carola. Rumor had it that Carola planned to release the video at the wedding, humiliating Silvia in front of the guests. On April 16, 8 days before the wedding, Juan received the video along with an abusive text message calling him an unorno, a derisive term in Argentina for someone who has been betrayed. Since his phone couldn't play the video, when he showed it to Silvia, she remained calm, deleting the file before he could see it. The next day, Silvia decided to confront Carola. Silvia went to Carola's house first, but didn't see her. Silvia then went to the restaurant and found Carola on the phone in the backyard. In the kitchen, Silvia grabbed a meat tenderizer, a heavy, mallet-like object, and left. Suddenly, Silvia hit Carola in the temple. Carola fell, but managed to get up. The two then got into a heated argument, a build-up of jealousy, betrayal, and anger that had lasted for years. The fight lasted only a few seconds before co-workers intervened and separated them. Silvia fled, throwing the tool onto the street as she left. The restaurant owner offered to take Carola to the hospital, but she refused. Witnesses said that after the incident, Carola had a strange attitude, unusually quiet and indifferent. She told her colleagues that she was fine, that the blow did not hurt. When she got home that same day, she told her husband, Sergio, about the attack by Silvia. He urged her to go to the hospital, but she still considered it a normal argument, not serious. That night, while Carola was sleeping, Sergio noticed that she had started bleeding from a head wound. Panicked, he took her to the nearest hospital. Initially, the doctor diagnosed a skull fracture on X-ray. However, her symptoms were more severe, so an emergency computed tomography scan was needed to fully assess the damage. The first hospital did not have the appropriate diagnostic equipment, so they had to transfer her to another facility. There, a computed tomography scan revealed serious damage. A large blood clot in the skull was compressing vital areas of the brain, requiring immediate surgery. However, there was no neurosurgeon available to operate right away. With time running out, Carola was transferred again, this time to a hospital equipped to treat her. Within 24 hours, she underwent 3 surgeries, each aimed at reducing swelling and stopping the bleeding. Despite these efforts, the injuries were too severe. She suffered a middle cerebral artery stroke, and her prognosis became poor. Carola soon fell into a coma and was admitted to intensive care, where doctors monitored her continuously. Meanwhile, news of the shocking incident spread quickly through the town. In a community where everyone knew each other, everyone was shocked. Even Silvia's fiancé, Juan, was affected. 4 days before their wedding, the scandal made the celebration impossible, and the ceremony was cancelled. For Silvia, the collapse of her wedding plans was just the beginning. She now faced heartbreak and a criminal investigation. In her first police statement, she admitted hitting Carola, but claimed it was self-defense. She said the fight escalated when Carola became aggressive. Desperate, Silvia grabbed a meat mallet and swung it to escape. Silvia described Carola as the aggressor. Carola allegedly lunged at her, grabbed her arm, and tried to pin her down. Silvia insisted she acted only to protect herself. However, investigators must determine whether this is true or an attempt to distort the events of that fateful day. Police expanded their inquiry, interviewing friends, co-workers, and anyone familiar with the fraught relationship between Carola and Silvia. They aimed to reconstruct what happened in the days before the attack. Testimonies revealed a troubling pattern. The confrontation on the restaurant patio was not an isolated incident. Colleagues recalled frequent arguments, some turning physical. One episode stood out. During a heated exchange, they threw a soda container at each other in the middle of the restaurant, shocking everyone present. Their friendship had long mixed affection with conflict, and those tensions now looked like warnings of worse to come. After 9 days in intensive care, Carola died. Despite multiple surgeries and tireless medical efforts, she could not recover. Her husband, Sergio, was in utter agony. Their son, Augustine's world, seemed to collapse. For father and son, that day marked the most painful chapter of their lives. The forensic report detailed the severity of Carola's injuries. The meat mallet fractured the left side of her skull and caused an epidural hematoma, an internal bleed that worsened during critical hours. Before she reached a properly equipped hospital, experts concluded the attack was sudden and delivered from behind, giving Carola no chance to defend herself. There were no bruises or scratches on her arms or face to suggest a struggle. Forensic specialists noted that a person anticipating an attack typically raises their arms to shield themselves. Carola's body showed no such defensive injuries. The evidence indicated a surprise blow, brutal and deliberate, that left her helpless. One expert suggested that immediate medical care might have offered a slim chance of survival, but by the time she reached the right hospital, it was too late. Meanwhile, Silvia was arrested. Prosecutors charged her with simple homicide and requested pretrial detention. The case against her appeared strong. Her own admission. Despite the self-defense claim, forensic findings showing an unanticipated attack and witnesses who saw her holding the weapon right after the assault, the judge allowed the case to proceed and denied bail, citing flight risk. As Sylvia awaited trial in custody, the town of General Las Heras remained stunned. Neighbors and business owners struggled to grasp how a friendship once described as sister-like had ended in tragedy. The story quickly spread nationwide, and rumors grew. One rumor claimed that since early 2009, Sylvia had been meeting a secret lover at a nearby hotel where the infamous video was recorded. Another said Carola had found the footage, removed the SIM card from Sylvia's phone, and copied the material to expose her. Some believed the video had been leaked by the man who appeared in it. His identity, however, was unknown. The only clear detail: he had grey hair. That single clue fueled speculation that the man might be Sergio, Carola's husband. The theory gained momentum, suggesting Sergio could have been the trigger for the tragedy. An old photo that has been rediscovered, believed to be from the couple's trip, shows Sergio looking at Sylvia in a way that some have deemed sexy. From there, the gossip snowballed. One version claimed Carola, suspicious of her husband, asked Sylvia to test him by flirting to see if he would take the bait. According to that rumor, Sylvia tried more than once, but was firmly rejected. Whether true or not, each version intensified the scandal and reinforced the idea that jealousy and betrayal fueled the fatal confrontation. On April 27, the day Sylvia was supposed to marry, the same priest who was to bless her wedding presided over Carola's funeral instead. At midday, Carola's body was brought to a funeral home for a private ceremony, then taken to the parish church, and finally to the local cemetery. Family, friends, and neighbors gathered to say goodbye. Juan, who had ended his engagement to Sylvia but remained close to Carola, was among them. Out of respect, the restaurant where the attack occurred closed for mourning. Nearly 2 years later, in February 2012, Sylvia went to trial. The courtroom was packed, with the two families seated apart to avoid conflict. The prosecutor charged her with simple homicide, punishable in Argentina by 8 to 25 years, and requested a 14-year sentence. Sergio, Carola's husband, agreed with the charge, but asked for 17 years. The prosecution argued that Sylvia attacked out of fear that Carola would expose her secret. They said Sylvia believed Carola planned to project the video at her wedding, driven by that threat, struck with premeditation, showing cruelty and intent. Sergio testified that he was not the man in the video and that he did not believe Carola intended to humiliate Sylvia at the wedding. He said Carola returned home after the assault and told him only that Sylvia had hit her with the mallet without mentioning a motive. He also noted that the families were close and that he had been invited to the wedding, where he planned to film the event as a gift. Another key witness was a colleague who worked with Carola and Sylvia at the restaurant. She said that on the day of the attack, Sylvia came to her home in tears, asking whether she knew about a video Carola might reveal. The co-worker confirmed there were rumors among staff but said she didn't know Carola's intentions. The co-worker added that Sylvia had confided that she no longer wanted to work with Carola, that the stress was unbearable, and that if the situation continued, she might harm herself. The co-worker admitted she didn't take the warning seriously. Later that day, she tried to call Carola to alert her about Sylvia's state of mind, but the call cut off at the very moment the fatal confrontation occurred. Sylvia's former fiancé, Juan, also testified. He said that when he asked Sylvia about the video, she refused to give details. Another key witness was her first husband, who said their marriage ended not only because of infidelity, but also because of Sylvia's volatile and aggressive behavior. Although Carola's family and friends described her as a kind, innocent person, the trial revealed a hard truth. Evidence showed that Carola herself had taken the SIM card from Sylvia's phone, copied the intimate video, and shared it with her colleagues. From there, the video spread uncontrollably until nearly the entire town had seen it. On February 15, 2012, at the final hearing, Sylvia finally spoke. She had previously refused to testify, but chose to give a statement before sentencing. In tears, she said she had never intended to kill Carola. Her testimony focused less on remorse than on her own pain. She spoke about losing her children, her husband, her job, and about spending 2 years in pretrial detention. On February 24, the court delivered its verdict. Sylvia Luna was found guilty of homicide, but not premeditated murder, and sentenced to 10 years in prison. For Carola's family, this was far from enough. Sergio's lawyers appealed, seeking a longer sentence. However, in May 2013, the case took an unexpected turn. The appeals court unanimously reduced Sylvia's sentence to 4.5 years, finding she acted in a state of extreme agitation. Psychological evaluations and positive reports of her conduct in prison also influenced the decision. Carola's family condemned the ruling as unjust. To them, nothing about the crime suggested a brief loss of control. They saw it as brutal, deliberate, and irreversible. On July 11, 2013, after serving 2/3 of the reduced sentence, Sylvia was quietly released. Authorities avoided publicity to prevent renewed scandal. Sylvia moves in with her parents and tries to rebuild her life, away from the town where she once lived with bitterness. Years later, in 2017, her name was in the news again. A photo circulated of her holding a cardboard sign announcing her nursing graduation. Journalists looking into her new life found that during prison, she began corresponding with another inmate, Leandro Scacciari, imprisoned for armed robbery. Their relationship grew despite distance and incarceration. After her release, Sylvia visited him until he, too, was freed. They later formalized their relationship and had a child. For Carola's family, moving on was much harder. Sergio remained in the town and the house he once shared with Carola. For him, every corner of the house is a memory, including the bedroom, where he first realized something terrible had happened the night Carola began bleeding. Their son, Augustine, initially studied law, driven by the sense of injustice surrounding his mother's death. Over time, he followed another passion, food and the sea, and eventually left Argentina to build a future far from painful memories in General Las Heras. The story of Carola and Sylvia never faded. Even younger generations know the tragedy. Outsiders sometimes visit the restaurant where it happened, drawn by morbid curiosity. For them, it is a grim landmark. For locals, it is the place where lives were shattered and a friendship turned violent. The case remains controversial. Some say justice was served. Sylvia was convicted, punished, and later rebuilt her life. Others argue the sentence was far too short, that Carola lost her future, while Sylvia was given another chance. One question still lingers: who was the man in the video? Many speculated it was Sergio, but the truth remains with those involved, and none have revealed it. What is certain is that the story of Carola and Sylvia will always divide opinion. It is a reminder of how envy, betrayal, and secrecy can spiral into irreversible tragedy, leaving wounds that no sentence, explanation, or passing years can fully heal. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Matthew Hoffman. Matthew Hoffman was born on November 1, 1980. Little is known about his childhood, but he was probably a quiet and somewhat withdrawn child who was loved by his parents. Although there may have been some strange traits in his behavior,
They did not indicate that Matthew was a danger to others. He was very fond of plants, especially leaves. Matthew was a loner with no friends, and many people thought he was strange, even suspecting that he might have mental problems. He graduated from high school but did not pursue further education. After getting a job as a plumber's assistant in Colorado, Matthew, with no friends or acquaintances to help him, secretly stayed in a corner of one of his clients' apartments while they were away. When he learned that the landlord was returning, instead of cleaning up and leaving, he set fire to the apartment to hide his presence. Matthew was arrested and sentenced to 8 years in prison, but he only served 6 years and was released early for good behavior. In 2009, after returning to his hometown in Ohio, he bought a small house. He began dating a woman who had a young son from a previous relationship. Things went well for a while, as they all lived together until late 2010. Matthew's neighbors noticed a sudden change in his behavior. Previously, he enjoyed playing with the neighborhood kids and his girlfriend's son. However, he recently became irritable and angry. His girlfriend was fed up with this behavior, so she packed up and moved out of his house with her son. As a result, Matthew's situation worsened, and he lost his part-time job as a tree trimmer. The reason he was fired was that he was not doing a good job. Instead of working, he would sit in a tree for hours, staring into space. After losing his job, he began to live more frugally. A neighbor reported that he turned off the lights in his entire house to save on bills. He then built a platform in one of the trees on his property and spent hours sitting there, watching the neighborhood. Neighbors advised their children not to play outside while Matthew was in the tree, as they found his behavior very disturbing. He would sometimes catch and kill squirrels, cook them, and eat them, which one neighbor believed was because he had no money and could not afford food. A few weeks after breaking up with his girlfriend, she returned to collect the last of their belongings. They had a heated argument that escalated, and Matthew attempted to strangle her. Although she initially filed a lawsuit, she changed her mind and dropped the case a few days later. In November 2010, Matthew began behaving strangely and was found stealing various items. He soon developed a new hobby of breaking into homes in his small town. One house that caught his attention was located in the suburbs near a wooded area. He spent a lot of time in the trees watching the house. The occupants of the house included 32-year-old Tina Herman, her 2 children, 13-year-old Sarah Maynard, and 11-year-old Cody Maynard, and her boyfriend. The garage door was not properly locked, allowing Matthew easy access. Although there are neighboring houses, they are far enough away that no one can see or hear anything unusual at night. On November 9, 2010, Matthew was in the woods when he saw Tina's boyfriend leave for work at the distribution center at 3 a.m. It was still dark, and he was supposed to be gone for at least the day. Matthew then noticed 2 children leaving for school, followed by Tina, who left at 9 a.m. Thinking that she was leaving for work, Matthew decided to pack his things and break into Tina's house through the garage. He spent the next few hours exploring the rooms and slowly gathering items to put in bags. Usually burglars are quick and take what they want before leaving. However, Matthew moved slowly around the house. When he heard a car approaching, he realized he might be spotted, so he quickly hid in the furthest room, which turned out to be Tina's bedroom. Tina Herman returned home after a walk with her friend Stephanie. They had the day off and had gone shopping together. When she got home, Tina took her bag into the bedroom to put away the things she had bought. In the meantime, Matthew hit her on the head with the handle of a large knife, causing her to flinch and scream. He then attacked her. Stephanie, Tina's friend, took the things she had bought out of the car to bring into the house. When she got inside, Matthew suddenly attacked her. She tried to escape, but he was faster and caught up with her. A dog lived in the house, and it started barking loudly during the chaos. Matthew eventually dealt with the dog. After the crime, instead of running away, Matthew dragged the 2 bodies into the bathroom. There, he started to process their bodies and place them in trash bags. After filling the bags, he carried them to Stephanie's car, which was parked nearby, and loaded them into the back of the car. After finishing, he returned to the house to clean up the scene. While inside, he heard Tina's children, Cody and Sarah, coming home from school, so he hid and waited for them to come in. Shortly after, Matthew attacked Cody. The boy tried to escape, but Matthew struck him in the back of the head, killing him instantly. Meanwhile, Sarah ran down the hall to her room and tried to close the door to keep Matthew from entering, but he broke it open. Instead of killing Sarah, he found an electrical cord in her room and tied her up. He then covered her head with a pillowcase, picked her up, and carried her into the kitchen, where he laid her on the floor. Sarah was silent for an hour, listening to Matthew handling the body Cody's and mumbling to himself. He then picked Sarah up, carried her outside, and placed her in the back seat of Stephanie's car, along with the body bags. After driving about a mile to his parking spot in a secluded area, Matthew carried Sarah into his car and drove home. When he arrived, he locked her in the bathroom after gagging her. He then went back to Stephanie's parking lot to hide the garbage bags containing the body parts. He returned to his house, where he found himself exhausted and falling asleep. But before he fell asleep, he tied Sarah to him with a rope to prevent her from escaping. While Matthew slept, Sarah looked around the house and saw something strange. The floors and walls were covered with leaves, and there were bags filled with leaves scattered all over the house. When Matthew woke up, he decided to move Sarah to the basement, a small corner used for storage. He placed a blanket inside, put a pile of leaves on the ground, chained her up, and gagged her again. Matthew planned to go back to Tina's house to burn it, because he couldn't clean up the blood at the scene. He drove Stephanie's car to Tina's house and parked it in the garage. He then took Tina's pickup truck and went to his house to get a gas tank to burn it. However, the pickup broke down on the way. Not knowing what to do, Matthew abandoned the car in the university parking lot and walked home. The basement where Sarah was held was cold, dark, and damp. She was constantly freezing and had no choice but to lie down or sit because of the low ceilings. Matthew provided her with spoiled food and prevented her from using the bathroom. He wrapped a garbage bag around her waist to serve as a makeshift diaper and did not allow her to clean herself. The next day, Tina and Stephanie's co-workers noticed that they did not show up for work, raising concerns. Tina's supervisor went to her home and discovered that Tina's pickup truck was missing. Looking through the window, she saw an unusual mess inside the house. The employee eventually broke the window to enter the house, where she discovered a significant amount of blood and immediately called the police. When the police arrived and searched the house, they found no one there. The officers discovered that the children had not attended school that day. Inside the house, although no bodies were found, there was a significant amount of blood in almost every room. The investigation was aided by the discovery of empty trash bags in the house, which contained receipts for items purchased at a hardware store. Officers took this information to the store and requested video footage from a specific date and time. Although the man who made the purchase was not clearly visible in the footage, they were able to track him as he walked to his car, identifying it as a Toyota. At the same time, a search was underway for Tina's missing pickup truck, which was eventually found in the university parking lot. Inside the truck, police found empty gas cans. The police then gathered all the evidence and focused their search on the drivers of Toyotas. Ironically, Matthew's driver's license had a picture of him wearing the same shirt seen in the store footage, leading to his identification. The police deployed a special weapons and tactics team to Matthew's home. When they entered, Matthew, who was asleep on the couch and unaware of the situation, did not resist and was taken into custody without incident. After the arrest, the police conducted a search of Matthew's home and found Sarah in the basement. She was lying on a pile of leaves, tied up, but still alive. The police were shocked by the state of Matthew's home, which was littered with leaves, bags of leaves hanging from the walls, and the floor covered in leaves. In the living room, there was a pile of leaves, large enough to raise suspicions about what might be hidden underneath, especially given the disappearances of Stephanie, Tina, and Cody. Despite the chaos of the scene, the police found no evidence of a crime. They discovered strange and seemingly meaningless drawings on the doors and kitchen walls. The refrigerator contained the bodies of beavers and squirrels. When questioned, Matthew remained calm and quiet. He claimed the murders were the result of a botched burglary. Matthew intended to steal valuables and was surprised when Tina and Stephanie returned home. In a panic, he killed them. The police rejected the initial account, asserting that the crime was premeditated. Matthew found that the garage was open and that in the morning, everyone had left the house. Near the property, they found a sleeping bag and a burned area under a tree, which showed signs of having been climbed multiple times for a better view. They also found large bags of trash in the garage, along with a receipt indicating that Matthew had purchased them a week before the murders. Prosecutors pointed out that burglars typically do not linger in homes for hours. They take what they need and leave quickly. The police asked Matthew where he had hidden the victims. Initially, Matthew refused to reveal the location of the bodies, which led to a deal being struck. Facing the death penalty for his crimes, he was promised a reduced sentence if he disclosed the location of the bodies. Although he initially resisted, Matthew eventually wrote a confession and agreed to lead the police to the scene. He took them to a large tree in the reserve, where he had created a hollow at the top, accessible only by climbing equipment. Inside, the police discovered large plastic garbage bags filled with body parts. Matthew also requested that the police not damage the tree, as he believed it was sacred. However, the tree was cut down. On January 6, 2011, Matthew Hoffman pleaded guilty to the murders of Tina, Cody, and Stephanie, as well as to the abuse of their bodies. He also pleaded guilty to kidnapping and abusing Sarah for 4 days. As a result, Matthew Hoffman was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sarah faced many challenges but remained strong and played a key role in the investigation, receiving praise from the police for her courage. She wanted the opportunity to speak at Matthew's sentencing to confront him directly. However, she was advised against doing so. After losing her mother and brother, she moved in with her father and stepmother. Sarah later wrote a book called Girl in the Leaves. When Sarah turned 16, her father and stepmother were charged with assaulting her. A protective order was issued, and Sarah moved in with another relative. Not much has been heard from her since then, but she is safe and well. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lecia Mitchell Jackson. In 1979, the Jackson family lived in Conroe. They chose to build their lives there and were respected by the community as a hard-working and loving couple. Over time, they had 3 children, with Lecia Mitchell Jackson being the youngest. Despite the high crime rate in the area, the Jackson family felt safe and content with their peaceful life. Lecia was intelligent and well-read, spending her time with books. She did well in school, prioritizing her studies as she wanted to go to college, obtain a solid education, and build a career. Lecia spent most of her time with her 2 older brothers, and despite the age gap, they had a close relationship and enjoyed spending time together. When her brothers turned 16 and 18, Lecia was only 12, which made her feel safe around them. On September 7, 1979, the weather was warm, perfect for a day at the lake. The brothers had not originally planned to take Lecia with them, but she asked to come along at the last minute. Their cousin, who was 20 at the time, also joined them. The parents allowed the 4 of them to go to the lake, a popular activity in the area where locals often fish or gather by the water. They prepared and headed to the lake in the afternoon, arriving around 4 p.m. They spent some time relaxing, swimming, and sunbathing, planning to leave at 7 p.m. to prepare for the next day. Since it was Lycia's first time there, she wanted to explore the area more. She decided not to swim and just wanted to walk. However, none of the brothers wanted to go with her, so they let her go by herself. Most of the way to the parking lot, where Lycia's brothers were waiting, was visible. When Lycia was out of sight, the others continued to prepare to leave, unaware that she had disappeared. These were usually peaceful areas where attacks and murders were rare, so the 12-year-old girl did not feel afraid. After about half an hour, when Lycia still had not appeared, her brothers began to worry. They rushed to find her, first using their phones to call their sister, other family members, and the police. The older brother went to a nearby gas station, which had the only phone in the area, to report Lycia's disappearance to their parents. Meanwhile, the rest of the group intensified their search. Their concern attracted the attention of other vacationers, and some local boys and girls joined in to help. They searched the area, calling for Lycia, but found nothing. Some even began diving into the shallow part of the lake, thinking she might have swum alone and drowned. On the other side of the lake, where Lycia had gone, was a steep cliff. Some people speculated that she might have tried to dive in but failed. However, Lycia was not the adventurous type and would not have made such a choice. In addition, without her brother following her, the underwater search would have been fruitless. After a while, Lycia's parents arrived at the scene with the police. Some volunteers also came to help search the lake area, and a few policemen spoke to her brother, who had lost track of her. The police's initial hypothesis was that she had accidentally drowned, and they based this on the presence of the cliff. They first focused their search on the lakeshore and the quieter areas of the lake, thinking that she might have decided to swim while walking and had come to a part of the lake where swimming was not allowed. There were dangerous undercurrents that could have caused her legs to cramp, leading to drowning. Searching the area yielded no results. The police believed that the unpredictable undercurrent could have pulled an inexperienced swimmer under. They hypothesized that Lycia might have fallen victim to such a current, which could have caused her body to sink and not resurface. Lycia's brother insisted that she had been wearing casual clothes, not a swimsuit, and that she was a good girl who would never have gone underwater dressed like that. Unfortunately, it seemed that no one listened to him, as the focus remained on the accidental drowning theory. After hours of fruitless searching, the group considered calling in divers to examine the water further. Suddenly, one of the searchers discovered small, broken glasses that clearly belonged to a child. When shown to other children, they confirmed that Lycia had been wearing the same type of glasses. The most alarming detail was the faint bloodstains on the glasses. It was suspected that these glasses had been found on a road leading away from the lake, especially since no trace of Lycia was found in the water. This led the police to shift their focus from drowning to kidnapping, increasing their attention to the land around the lake. Near where the glasses were found, the police also discovered an earring that belonged to Lycia. Her parents confirmed that it was hers. Another witness informed the police that he had seen a brown Chevrolet Monte Carlo driven by a reckless driver who was behaving erratically. The driver suddenly changed lanes and skidded on the road, appearing to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs. This behavior raised suspicion, prompting the police to investigate young people driving similar vehicles that matched the witness's description. However, there were many such cars in the area, as this model was quite common. In addition, no one could clearly remember the driver's face or license plate number, leaving the police without any solid clues. They checked the road service reports in the hope that the reckless driver had been involved in an accident, but found nothing. Lycia's brothers felt guilty for not looking after their sister, and all the family members wanted to know what had happened to Lycia. Lycia's parents hoped that they would receive a call from the kidnapper demanding a ransom. However, the phone remained silent, and no letters arrived in the first 24 hours after she went missing. Initially, Lycia's family hoped that she would return home safely. But as time went on, that chance began to diminish rapidly. The situation worsened on September 13, 6 days after Licia's disappearance. Early that morning, a worker was preparing to go to the oil facility where he had worked for many years when his supervisor received a call. He was directed to a remote area to inspect and repair a pipeline, which happened to be near the lake where the Jackson family had vacationed a week earlier. Upon arriving and inspecting the pipeline, the worker immediately smelled a very strong and unpleasant odor. Although the smell was not unusual for him, as the facility was located in a wilderness area where animals sometimes got into the pipeline and died, he was accustomed to dealing with such situations. Cleaning up dead animals was part of his daily routine. After completing the repair, he decided to investigate the source of the stench. A few meters from the pipeline, he discovered the body of a small child. He quickly notified his superiors, who called the police. When they reported the discovery of a child's body, the police immediately thought of the missing girl, Licia, for whom they had been actively searching in the area. The state of the body made immediate identification impossible. It was so decomposed that even determining the gender was difficult. They would need to conduct an examination and check dental records to confirm that the body was indeed Licia, marking the end of the search for the girl. This also began the hunt for the person responsible for the crime. During the investigation at the site where the body was discovered, the police found Licia's clothes. They concluded that the girl's body had been brought to the location after the crime had occurred and that the attack had not taken place there. The perpetrator appeared to have been careless with the evidence, leaving it behind. It is likely that the suspect was a local resident familiar with the area. The condition of the body complicated the investigation. Experts determined that the girl had been abused and then strangled, but the exact circumstances of the crime could not be established. During an examination of her clothing, small biological traces were found on her shorts, which could potentially identify the perpetrator. Unfortunately, in 1979, forensic technology was not advanced enough to analyze these traces, but the police wisely chose to preserve them for future analysis. Licia's death caused panic and tension in the community. The city, known for its low crime rate, had not experienced a murder in many years. The brutal murder of a 12-year-old girl in broad daylight, especially in a relatively densely populated area, left the community in a state of shock. People no longer felt safe, and the police station was overwhelmed with calls from locals asking for increased security and a swift arrest of the perpetrator. Unfortunately, this was not an easy task. The police followed many leads regarding the suspect, but all of them came to a dead end. Additionally, almost everyone who was present at the lake on that tragic day was investigated. Special focus was placed on the owners of brown cars. These checks lasted for months, but yielded no results. The police also investigated known abusers who were in the area at the time, but these efforts also proved fruitless. Years passed, but Licia's family still could not learn the truth about what happened to her. As the 1990s and 2000s progressed, Licia's relatives came to terms with their situation, losing hope of discovering what had happened to Licia. They admitted that they even forgave the person responsible. However, in 2020, new forensic techniques began to emerge from advances in the United States. Beginning in 2005, investigations into long unsolved crimes were launched. Police formed teams to re-examine old evidence with fresh perspectives. This renewed effort brought hope for answers to questions that had haunted the community for decades. Police recovered Licia's clothing, which contained small traces that could potentially be linked to a suspect. A thorough analysis was conducted, but unfortunately, the technology of the time was not sufficient to extract meaningful data from those small traces. This left Licia's family feeling hopeless once again. Licia's family and friends, who have long sought answers about her fate, are facing another wave of painful disappointment. However, In 2021, a significant technological advance emerged. New methods and equipment were developed that can collect and analyze microscopic traces. A key feature of this technology is the ability to completely recreate DNA samples from even the smallest remnants found on the victim's belongings and clothing. This advance has the potential to transform the investigation, as evidence collected in the 1970s could finally become significant. A team of experts was formed to re-examine the evidence using these advanced techniques. Concerns arose again about the number of traces available. If they were too few, they would have to wait for further technological advances. Fortunately, the new method successfully extracted DNA from Lycia's clothing for the first time. However, reconstructing her genetic profile required a significant amount of time and analysis. The investigation began in April 2021 and continued until October 2022, when the police finally had a complete profile of the criminal. By that time, 43 years had passed since Lycia's tragic death. The next step was to find the killer and ensure he was punished for his crimes. The police decided to cross-reference the profile with several databases, including KOS and those used by the FBI. This approach had been tried before, but the incomplete genetic profile made it difficult to narrow down potential suspects and find a reliable match. In April 2022, the police reassessed the information. After 43 years of investigation, they identified the killer as Gerald Dwight Casey. Police tracked down his last known address, hoping to confront this dangerous criminal. Unfortunately, they discovered that Gerald had died at the age of 47, 20 years before this investigation began. The police decided to take a closer look at his background. They discovered that Gerald's activities did not end with the murder of Lycia. He committed another brutal crime in 1989, exactly 10 years later. After killing Lycia, he moved to a nearby town, about a half-hour's drive from the lake, hoping to remain under the radar until the situation calmed down. Starting on November 20th, Gerald moved to another city with his girlfriend. Gerald had a troubled past, faced serious legal problems, and struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. Those who knew him considered him dangerous and unpredictable. He was a robber and had committed a series of petty thefts. At that time, Gerald was engaged to Carla Smith, 36, who also had a history of theft, legal trouble, and substance abuse. She had developed a reputation for reckless behavior. On one occasion, she was arrested for drunk driving, causing several accidents in which no one was injured. This incident led to a police chase, but she ultimately chose to stop. The young couple was planning to move to New York to start a new life and hoped to become wealthy. However, they did not have the resources necessary for such a dramatic change. With their experience in robbery, Gerald and Carla knew how to handle their situation. In the city, there was a couple named Sonia Lynn Howell and Daryl Pennington, who were known for their business success and financial stability. They knew about Daryl and Sonia, a wealthy couple, and decided to visit their house to assess the possibility of a robbery. After observing the house for a while, they noticed that Daryl and Sonia often went away together, probably for work, which would give them more opportunities to carry out their plan. After reviewing the information, the robbers planned and chose the time to break into the house. Their goal was to sell the stolen items at a pawn shop to raise money for their trip to New York. Unfortunately, their plan began to fall apart immediately. Once inside, Gerald and Carla found Sonia at home. Realizing the danger, she tried to call the police, but Carla stopped her by pointing a gun at her head and shooting her while she was dialing. Gerald then pulled out a gun and fired 9 shots at Sonia, leaving her with no chance of survival. The loud gunshots attracted the attention of the neighbors, who quickly reported the incident to the police. In their haste, the robbers took everything of value they found in the house, including money, jewelry, a Rolex watch, guns, and other equipment, before fleeing the scene. Carla searched Sonia and took valuables from her pockets. During this time, they discovered two strangers inside the victim's house. When the police arrived, the couple had already escaped. Unfortunately, no one was able to identify the car or the faces of the criminals because they were wearing masks. The police began to search for them, but the experienced robbers had carefully planned their escape route and fled by car without being detected. Later, an abandoned car matching the description given by witnesses was found on the outskirts of the city. It seemed like a perfect case again, but this time, greed got the better of them. They were too impatient and rushed to New York, which led to a number of mistakes. The biggest mistake they made was to immediately go to a pawn shop and sell all the stolen goods there. The pawnbroker did not display the goods and instead contacted the police. The pawnbroker remembered the thieves, returned the stolen goods, and provided footage from his surveillance camera. The police recognized several familiar faces and later located and arrested Gerald and Carla on the highway. The couple was headed to New York, but their trip was abruptly stopped at a checkpoint. They did not resist arrest, although the police were prepared to use force if necessary. While they denied killing Sonia, the evidence at the crime scene was clear bloody fingerprints and their hair were found. Carla accepted a plea deal with the prosecution in exchange for a lighter sentence. Her lawyer considered this a favorable deal because the couple faced the possibility of the death penalty. As a result, she testified against her boyfriend Gerald, leading to his conviction for Sonia's murder and several other crimes. Gerald was sentenced to death, while Carla received a reduced sentence of 10 years in prison for her involvement in the incident. After serving 10 years, Carla was released and has not had any legal problems since. Gerald, on the other hand, remained incarcerated while awaiting execution. After several appeals, he was finally given a lethal injection on April 18, 2002, at the age of 47. Gerald's attorney made significant efforts to have his sentence commuted to life in prison to save his life, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Throughout his life, up until his execution, Gerald never admitted to killing Sonia and did not mention the murder of Lesia Mitchell Jackson. The evidence against him for Lesia's murder was clear and convincing. It is suspected that Gerald may have been involved in more murders in Texas in the 1970s and 1980s. However, thorough investigations using various databases have found no genetic matches between him and evidence from other unsolved cases. This does not mean that he limited himself to just 2 violent incidents. At a time when forensic science was just beginning to advance and the understanding of genetics was limited, it is likely that some of his other victims have not yet been discovered. There may still be unsolved cases in the archives. Lesia's family was relieved to know that her killer had been brought to justice, but this did not bring them much comfort. Lesia's mother struggled for a long time to come to terms with her daughter's murder. She made it clear that she did not blame her sons for not keeping an eye on their sister, although the brothers still carry a sense of guilt. A few years after the tragedy, the Lesia family moved away from Texas in search of a place where they would not be reminded of their past. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Lesia Mitchell Jackson. In 1979, the Jackson family lived in Conroe. They chose to build their lives there and were respected by the community as a hard-working and loving couple. Over time, they had 3 children, with Lesia Mitchell Jackson being the youngest. Despite the high crime rate in the area, the Jackson family felt safe and content with their peaceful life. Lesia was intelligent and well-read, spending her time with books. She did well in school, prioritizing her studies as she wanted to go to college, obtain a solid education, and build a career. Lesia spent most of her time with her 2 older brothers, and despite the age gap, they had a close relationship and enjoyed spending time together. When her brothers turned 16 and 18, Lesia was only 12, which made her feel safe around them. On September 7, 1979, the weather was warm, perfect for a day at the lake. The brothers had not originally planned to take Licia with them, but she asked to come along at the last minute. Their cousin, who was 20 at the time, also joined them. The parents allowed the four of them to go to the lake, a popular activity in the area where locals often fish or gather by the water. They prepared and headed to the lake in the afternoon, arriving around 4 p.m. They spent some time relaxing, swimming, and sunbathing, planning to leave at 7 p.m. to prepare for the next day. Since it was Licia's first time there, she wanted to explore the area more. She decided not to swim and just wanted to walk. However, none of the brothers wanted to go with her, so they let her go by herself. Most of the way to the parking lot, where Licia's brothers were waiting, was visible. When Licia was out of sight, the others continued to prepare to leave, unaware that she had disappeared. These were usually peaceful areas where attacks and murders were rare, so the 12-year-old girl did not feel afraid. After about half an hour, when Licia still had not appeared, her brothers began to worry. They rushed to find her, first using their phones to call their sister, other family members, and the police. The older brother went to a nearby gas station, which had the only phone in the area, to report Licia's disappearance to their parents. Meanwhile, the rest of the group intensified their search. Their concern attracted the attention of other vacationers, and some local boys and girls joined in to help. They searched the area, calling for Licia, but found nothing. Some even began diving into the shallow part of the lake, thinking she might have swum alone and drowned. On the other side of the lake, where Licia had gone, was a steep cliff. Some people speculated that she might have tried to dive in but failed. However, Licia was not the adventurous type and would not have made such a choice. In addition, without her brother following her, the underwater search would have been fruitless. After a while, Licia's parents arrived at the scene with the police. Some volunteers also came to help search the lake area, and a few policemen spoke to her brother, who had lost track of her. The police's initial hypothesis was that she had accidentally drowned, and they based this on the presence of the cliff. They first focused their search on the lakeshore and the quieter areas of the lake, thinking that she might have decided to swim while walking and had come to a part of the lake where swimming was not allowed. There were dangerous undercurrents that could have caused her legs to cramp, leading to drowning. Searching the area yielded no results. The police believed that the unpredictable undercurrent could have pulled an inexperienced swimmer under. They hypothesized that Licia might have fallen victim to such a current, which could have caused her body to sink and not resurface. Licia's brother insisted that she had been wearing casual clothes, not a swimsuit, and that she was a good girl who would never have gone underwater dressed like that. Unfortunately, it seemed that no one listened to him, as the focus remained on the accidental drowning theory. After hours of fruitless searching, the group considered calling in divers to examine the water further. Suddenly, one of the searchers discovered small, broken glasses that clearly belonged to a child. When shown to other children, they confirmed that Licia had been wearing the same type of glasses. The most alarming detail was the faint bloodstains on the glasses. It was suspected that these glasses had been found on a road leading away from the lake, especially since no trace of Licia was found in the water. This led the police to shift their focus from drowning to kidnapping, increasing their attention to the land around the lake. Near where the glasses were found, the police also discovered an earring that belonged to Licia. Her parents confirmed that it was hers. Another witness informed the police that he had seen a brown Chevrolet Monte Carlo driven by a reckless driver who was behaving erratically. The driver suddenly changed lanes and skidded on the road, appearing to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs. This behavior raised suspicion, prompting the police to investigate young people driving similar vehicles that matched the witness's description. However, there were many such cars in the area, as this model was quite common. In addition, no one could clearly remember the driver's face or license plate number, leaving the police without any solid clues. They checked the road service reports in the hope that the reckless driver had been involved in an accident, but found nothing. Licia's brothers felt guilty for not looking after their sister, and all the family members wanted to know what had happened to Licia. Licia's parents hoped that they would receive a call from the kidnapper demanding a ransom. However, the phone remained silent, and no letters arrived in the first 24 hours after she went missing. Initially, Licia's family hoped that she would return home safely, but as time went on, that chance began to diminish rapidly. The situation worsened on September 13, 6 days after Licia's disappearance. Early that morning, a worker was preparing to go to the oil facility where he had worked for many years when his supervisor received a call. He was directed to a remote area to inspect and repair a pipeline, which happened to be near the lake where the Jackson family had vacationed a week earlier. Upon arriving and inspecting the pipeline, the worker immediately smelled a very strong and unpleasant odor. Although the smell was not unusual for him, as the facility was located in a wilderness area where animals sometimes got into the pipeline and died, he was accustomed to dealing with such situations. Cleaning up dead animals was part of his daily routine. After completing the repair, he decided to investigate the source of the stench. A few meters from the pipeline, he discovered the body of a small child. He quickly notified his superiors, who called the police. When they reported the discovery of a child's body, the police immediately thought of the missing girl, Licia, for whom they had been actively searching in the area. The state of the body made immediate identification impossible. It was so decomposed that even determining the gender was difficult. They would need to conduct an examination and check dental records to confirm that the body was indeed Licia, marking the end of the search for the girl. This also began the hunt for the person responsible for the crime. During the investigation at the site where the body was discovered, the police found Licia's clothes. They concluded that the girl's body had been brought to the location after the crime had occurred, and that the attack had not taken place there. The perpetrator appeared to have been careless with the evidence, leaving it behind. It is likely that the suspect was a local resident familiar with the area. The condition of the body complicated the investigation. Experts determined that the girl had been abused and then strangled, but the exact circumstances of the crime could not be established. During an examination of her clothing, small biological traces were found on her shorts, which could potentially identify the perpetrator. Unfortunately, in 1979, forensic technology was not advanced enough to analyze these traces, but the police wisely chose to preserve them for future analysis. Licia's death caused panic and tension in the community. The city, known for its low crime rate, had not experienced a murder in many years. The brutal murder of a 12-year-old girl in broad daylight, especially in a relatively densely populated area, left the community in a state of shock. People no longer felt safe, and the police station was overwhelmed with calls from locals asking for increased security and a swift arrest of the perpetrator. Unfortunately, this was not an easy task. The police followed many leads regarding the suspect, but all of them came to a dead end. Additionally, almost everyone who was present at the lake on that tragic day was investigated. Special focus was placed on the owners of brown cars. These checks lasted for months, but yielded no results. The police also investigated known abusers who were in the area at the time, but these efforts also proved fruitless. Years passed, but Licia's family still could not learn the truth about what happened to her. As the 1990s and 2000s progressed, Licia's relatives came to terms with their situation, losing hope of discovering what had happened to Licia. They admitted that they even forgave the person responsible. However, in 2020, new forensic techniques began to emerge from advances in the United States. Beginning in 2005, investigations into long unsolved crimes were launched. Police formed teams to re-examine old evidence with fresh perspectives. This renewed effort brought hope for answers to questions that had haunted the community for decades. Police recovered Licia's clothing, which contained small traces that could potentially be linked to a suspect. A thorough analysis was conducted, but unfortunately, the technology of the time was not sufficient to extract meaningful data from those small traces. This left Licia's family feeling hopeless once again. Licia's family and friends, who have long sought answers about her fate, are facing another wave of painful disappointment. However, in 2021, a significant technological advance emerged. New methods and equipment were developed that can collect and analyze microscopic traces. A key feature of this technology is the ability to completely recreate DNA samples from even the smallest remnants found on the victim's belongings and clothing. This advance has the potential to transform the investigation, as evidence collected in the 1970s could finally become significant. A team of experts was formed to re-examine the evidence using these advanced techniques. Concerns arose again about the number of traces available. If they were too few, they would have to wait for further technological advances. Fortunately, the new method successfully extracted DNA from Licia's clothing for the first time. However, reconstructing her genetic profile required a significant amount of time and analysis. The investigation began in April 2021 and continued until October 2022, when the police finally had a complete profile of the criminal. By that time, 43 years had passed since Licia's tragic death. The next step was to find the killer and ensure he was punished for his crimes. The police decided to cross-reference the profile with several databases, including KOS and those used by the FBI. This approach had been tried before, but the incomplete genetic profile made it difficult to narrow down potential suspects and find a reliable match. In April 2022, the police reassessed the information. After 43 years of investigation, they identified the killer as Gerald Dwight Casey. Police tracked down his last known address, hoping to confront this dangerous criminal. Unfortunately, they discovered that Gerald had died at the age of 47, 20 years before this investigation began. The police decided to take a closer look at his background. They discovered that Gerald's activities did not end with the murder of Licia. He committed another brutal crime in 1989, exactly 10 years later. After killing Licia, he moved to a nearby town, about a half-hour's drive from the lake, hoping to remain under the radar until the situation calmed down. Starting on November 20th, Gerald moved to another city with his girlfriend. Gerald had a troubled past, faced serious legal problems, and struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. Those who knew him considered him dangerous and unpredictable. He was a robber and had committed a series of petty thefts. At that time, Gerald was engaged to Carla Smith, 36, who also had a history of theft, legal trouble, and substance abuse. She had developed a reputation for reckless behavior. On one occasion, she was arrested for drunk driving, causing several accidents in which no one was injured. This incident led to a police chase, but she ultimately chose to stop. The young couple was planning to move to New York to start a new life and hoped to become wealthy. However, they did not have the resources necessary for such a dramatic change. With their experience in robbery, Gerald and Carla knew how to handle their situation. In the city, there was a couple named Sonia Lynn Howell and Daryl Pennington, who were known for their business success and financial stability. They knew about Daryl and Sonia, a wealthy couple, and decided to visit their house to assess the possibility of a robbery. After observing the house for a while, they noticed that Daryl and Sonia often went away together, probably for work, which would give them more opportunities to carry out their plan. After reviewing the information, the robbers planned and chose the time to break into the house. Their goal was to sell the stolen items at a pawn shop to raise money for their trip to New York. Unfortunately, their plan began to fall apart immediately. Once inside, Gerald and Carla found Sonia at home. Realizing the danger, she tried to call the police, but Carla stopped her by pointing a gun at her head and shooting her while she was dialing. Gerald then pulled out a gun and fired 9 shots at Sonia, leaving her with no chance of survival. The loud gunshots attracted the attention of the neighbors, who quickly reported the incident to the police. In their haste, the robbers took everything of value they found in the house, including money, jewelry, a Rolex watch, guns, and other equipment, before fleeing the scene. Carla searched Sonia and took valuables from her pockets. During this time, they discovered 2 strangers inside the victim's house. When the police arrived, the couple had already escaped. Unfortunately, no one was able to identify the car or the faces of the criminals because they were wearing masks. The police began to search for them, but the experienced robbers had carefully planned their escape route and fled by car without being detected. Later, an abandoned car matching the description given by witnesses was found on the outskirts of the city. It seemed like a perfect case again, but this time, greed got the better of them. They were too impatient and rushed to New York, which led to a number of mistakes. The biggest mistake they made was to immediately go to a pawn shop and sell all the stolen goods there. The pawnbroker did not display the goods and instead contacted the police. The pawnbroker remembered the thieves, returned the stolen goods, and provided footage from his surveillance camera. The police recognized several familiar faces and later located and arrested Gerald and Carla on the highway. The couple was headed to New York, but their trip was abruptly stopped at a checkpoint. They did not resist arrest, although the police were prepared to use force if necessary. While they denied killing Sonia, the evidence at the crime scene was clear bloody fingerprints and their hair were found. Carla accepted a plea deal with the prosecution in exchange for a lighter sentence. Her lawyer considered this a favorable deal because the couple faced the possibility of the death penalty. As a result, she testified against her boyfriend Gerald, leading to his conviction for Sonia's murder and several other crimes. Gerald was sentenced to death, while Carla received a reduced sentence of 10 years in prison for her involvement in the incident. After serving 10 years, Carla was released and has not had any legal problems since. Gerald, on the other hand, remained incarcerated while awaiting execution. After several appeals, he was finally given a lethal injection on April 18, 2002, at the age of 47. Gerald's attorney made significant efforts to have his sentence commuted to life in prison to save his life, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Throughout his life, up until his execution, Gerald never admitted to killing Sonia and did not mention the murder of Lesia Mitchell Jackson. The evidence against him for Lesia's murder was clear and convincing. It is suspected that Gerald may have been involved in more murders in Texas in the 1970s and 1980s. However, thorough investigations using various databases have found no genetic matches between him and evidence from other unsolved cases. This does not mean that he limited himself to just 2 violent incidents. At a time when forensic science was just beginning to advance and the understanding of genetics was limited, it is likely that some of his other victims have not yet been discovered. There may still be unsolved cases in the archives. Lesia's family was relieved to know that her killer had been brought to justice, but this did not bring them much comfort. Lesia's mother struggled for a long time to come to terms with her daughter's murder. She made it clear that she did not blame her sons for not keeping an eye on their sister, although the brothers still carry a sense of guilt. A few years after the tragedy, the Lesia family moved away from Texas in search of a place where they would not be reminded of their past.
Amy Beth Lord was born on December 21, 1988, in Springfield, Massachusetts. Her family moved to Wilbraham shortly after her birth, where she grew up with her 2 close sisters, Kimberly and Carly. The siblings shared a strong bond and enjoyed a loving family environment. After graduating high school in 2007, Amy pursued higher education at Bentley University, focusing on humanities, business, and marketing. Thanks to her remarkable intellect, she excelled academically and earned her bachelor's degree in 2011 becoming a certified marketer. Following her studies, Amy aimed to kickstart her career, relocating to Boston, Massachusetts. There, she quickly found a position as an internet marketing specialist and worked for 2 years. Life was going well. She made close friends and was in a relationship with Mike Cassell, with whom she was planning to start a family. On July 23, 2013, at 5:38 a.m., 24-year-old Amy was in the lobby of her apartment building. She had woken up early to meet her friend and co-worker, Christina Kelleher, for a gym session at 6 a.m. However, when Amy didn't arrive, Christina waited at the bus stop for a while before deciding to go to the gym alone, assuming her friend had overslept and didn't want to wake her. Although Amy was usually very punctual, Christina wasn't too concerned and expected to see her at work later, as their desks were next to each other. After finishing her workout, Christina was surprised to find that Amy was still not at the office. Feeling alarmed, she reached out to Mike, Amy's boyfriend, to check if he knew where she was. He had no idea and mentioned that he assumed Amy had gone to the gym. Over several hours, Mike and Christina tried repeatedly to reach Amy, but they were unsuccessful. At 11:30 a.m., Christina decided to contact the office manager. They had already called all of Amy's friends and acquaintances, but no one knew her whereabouts. Consequently, the management opted to report her missing to the police. After taking the report, the officers contacted Amy's parents, who had also not seen her. They agreed to meet with her relatives at her apartment in South Boston to investigate further, which happened around 2 p.m. Detectives searched the apartment for any evidence of a struggle, robbery, or other criminal activity, but found nothing out of order. Everything appeared to be in its place, and the locks were secure. It seemed that Amy had simply vanished. Her family emphasized that she led a happy and organized life. She had no plans for sudden trips and wouldn't have run away without informing anyone. They believed something must have happened to her. A contact lens belonging to Amy was discovered in the building's foyer, and there were also marks on the nearby wall that suggested a possible confrontation. To gather more information about Amy, police interviewed her parents in detail. They revealed that Amy was driving a black Jeep Cherokee SUV. Shortly after, an officer recalled that at 8:37 a.m. in southern Boston, a fire had been reported. At that location, they found an SUV fully engulfed in flames. The fire department extinguished the fire and then towed the vehicle for further investigation. The car's description matched Amy's SUV. She had not yet been officially reported missing at that time. Although the license plates were completely burned away, the lab was able to identify the chassis number of the burned vehicle, confirming that it belonged to Amy Lord. Detectives returned to the station and started verifying Amy's bank transaction data. They discovered that her bank cards had been used to withdraw money 5 times that morning, beginning at 6 a.m. The total amount withdrawn was approximately $1,000, and the withdrawals were made from different ATMs. This raised suspicions because it was unusual to withdraw money repeatedly from various locations in the city. The first transaction took place near her apartment. When the police arrived, they noticed a surveillance camera beside the ATM. They reviewed the footage, hoping to spot Amy in the morning recordings and gain insights into what happened. The process of reviewing the footage took considerable time, and officers examined recordings from all the ATMs where Amy's card had been used. They also found additional surveillance equipment on nearby buildings. All this evidence was gathered to piece together a clear timeline of events from that morning. While police were working with banks to collect footage, they received a call around 4 p.m. from a cyclist who had found a body at the Stony Brook Reservation in Hyde Park. The body was that of a young woman. Upon arrival, detectives discovered the victim was naked and had suffered over 40 stab wounds, primarily to her neck, face, and chest. There were also hand marks on her throat, suggesting she had been strangled. Her body was dumped in a secluded area covered with foxes, far from the city, but the killer did not attempt to conceal it. No identification was found. However, based on police photographs, they believed the victim was Amy Lord. Once her identity was confirmed, the missing person case transitioned into a murder investigation. The analysis of the CCTV recordings from the ATMs has been completed. The first sighting of Amy was at 6:35 a.m. She appeared alone at the ATM in her workout clothes and appeared uninjured. She used her ATM card and left. At 6:47 a.m., she arrived at another ATM just a few blocks away. This time, the camera captured her car from the outside. Amy was again unharmed and wearing sportswear. She withdrew cash by herself. However, her behavior was unusual. The police observed that, while the car was parked outside the bank, she was sitting in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat. About 7 minutes later, she appeared in another video, this time with visible facial injuries, including a broken nose and several bruises, indicating she had been attacked. It seemed she had been kidnapped, yet she did not attempt to escape. Amy withdrew cash again and returned to the car, remaining in the passenger seat. Detectives tracked the car's movements throughout the city and obtained more recordings in an effort to identify the driver. The first shot showing Amy in the passenger seat and the driver behind the wheel was captured at 6:10 a.m. This helped them establish a timeline of events, but they still could not identify the driver's face. While reviewing the footage, the police noticed that the driver was hiding his face, possibly with a t-shirt or a headband. He wore a cap, and in one clip, when he adjusted it, it showed that he had a clean-shaven head. Detectives needed to find the exact moment Amy was abducted, so they continued gathering information from CCTV cameras. This effort led them to capture the moment Amy left her apartment. As soon as she opened the door, she was attacked by an unknown man who had been waiting outside. Pacing back and forth, he forced her inside, and they stayed behind the closed door for about 15 minutes. At 5:52 a.m., both of them came out and walked toward Amy's car. This suggests that the first cash withdrawal happened while she was being threatened. This information helped the police piece together the sequence of events. As soon as she left her apartment, preparing for a workout before heading to work, she was kidnapped. The attacker likely persuaded her that if she gave him enough money, he would let her go. As a result, Amy did not resist and complied with his demands. After withdrawing the required amount from her card, she was taken out of town and attacked with a knife. Following the murder, her body was left in a wooded area, and her car was set on fire. The police were unable to obtain a clear image of the suspect's face. Investigators questioned Amy's relatives to check if anyone might have wanted to harm her, but she had no known enemies. Her boyfriend had a strong alibi and was ruled out as a suspect. The attacker needed gasoline to set the car on fire. In the video footage from when the attack started, the attacker was not seen carrying anything that looked like fuel. Therefore, he must have bought it at a gas station. After the attack, he drove 10 kilometers to a country park to dispose of the body before returning. Detectives reviewed all intersections with cameras where the perpetrator might have been seen. The investigation was challenging because the victim drove a common car. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of black SUVs in the city, but her relatives pointed out a distinctive clue, a cloverleaf-shaped sticker on the rear window. This made it easier to track her car in traffic and locate the gas station where the attacker had stopped. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera at that station wasn't working. Detectives noticed a liquor store across the street that had a front camera. They obtained some footage, but it was too distant to clearly see the criminal's face. At around 8 a.m., the suspect arrived at a gas station without Amy. The car was recognizable because of a cloverleaf-shaped sticker. Although the driver's face was not seen, he waved at someone and approached another person. They exchanged a few words, shook hands, and then the suspect's companion left. Fortunately, this person came closer to the liquor store's CCTV camera, allowing him to be identified. The police located him, had a conversation, and he revealed that he met his friend, 28-year-old Edwin Alamany, near the gas station. At 8 a.m., Edwin was in a black SUV that had not been seen before. He previously worked as a waiter's assistant and was currently unemployed. Early in the morning on July 23, 2013, around 4:23, another resident of South Boston, Alexandra Cruz, was attacked just before Amy was kidnapped. Alexandra was walking to her job at Dunkin' Donuts when a stranger assaulted her in the parking lot, hitting her in the jaw and causing her to briefly lose consciousness. The attacker then began to strangle her, but suddenly stopped, claiming he had made a mistake and was looking for someone else. He threatened to kill her if she screamed. He took her valuables and turned away for a moment, giving her the chance to escape. Despite his threat that she would be killed if she reported him, Alexandra did not keep quiet. Once she arrived at work, she called the police. About an hour later, an officer came to take her statement, and they created a composite sketch of the assailant. During the investigation at Amy's apartment, the police received another urgent call. Around midnight in South Boston, a girl was stabbed. Detectives quickly recognized that this crime occurred near Amy Lord's apartment. This led them to believe they were dealing with a serial attacker, as there had already been 3 similar incidents involving girls. The investigation needed to continue, as the officers received a new call. 21-year-old Kaylee Ballantyne was attacked shortly after midnight. She was the only daughter in her family, raised alongside 2 older brothers, which may have contributed to her ability to defend herself. Her parents described her as a fighter from a young age. All the children in the family were athletic, but despite her delicate appearance, Kaylee displayed remarkable strength, sometimes even outdoing her brothers. In 2003, when she was just 11, she faced a serious incident when a basketball backboard fell on her head, leaving her in a coma for a month. Fortunately, she survived, recovered fully, and even resumed playing hockey. When the police spoke with the victim of the latest attack, Kaylee was injured, but still alive and able to recount her night. She had been working and was heading home around midnight. With her headphones on, she didn't notice any danger right away. As she approached her apartment, she noticed a suspicious-looking man on the opposite side of the street. He was large and appeared to be watching her. Then, he crossed over to her side, stopped, and stared at her for about 5 seconds. This made her feel uneasy, so Kaylee hurried her steps. She got to her apartment and went to enter the code to get in. Initially, she entered it wrong, but got it right on the second try. When Kaylee opened the door, the man was right behind her. He put his hand on her left shoulder and pushed her through the door, his right hand holding a knife to her head. Kaylee fell to the floor, and the attacker pushed down on her, sitting on top of her. She pleaded for her life, asking him to take anything he wanted, but he began to stab her without saying a word. In a desperate attempt to protect herself, Kaylee crossed her left arm over her chest and started to fight back with her right hand. She also kicked at him. During the struggle, she successfully knocked the attacker's hand away, causing him to accidentally hurt himself and loosen his grip. Sports weren't merely a hobby for Kaylee, she was a professional athlete, strong and resilient, which helped her find the strength to fight back. This moment gave her the opportunity to save her life. After her attacker fell backwards and Simple walked away. As he walked away, Kaylee slammed the door behind him so he couldn't come back. She remembered that she didn't know how many times she had been stabbed and that she didn't really feel any pain when it happened. She tried to stand up, but she collapsed and her chest tightened. She wondered if it was her adrenaline, if she was dying, and knew she needed to get into her apartment. Kaylee said that for some reason, her apartment key was in her pocket, which made it much easier, so she crawled to the apartment door, unlocked it, and went inside. Once inside, she crawled to her first roommate's room and told her that she had just been stabbed and that she needed her to get towels, tissues, or anything to stitch up the wound and then call 911. She insisted on calling her loved ones, worried that she might not make it through the attack. Her friends stayed calm and encouraged her to call emergency services first. Meanwhile, the neighbor took a video of everything Kaylee said. Remarkably, she managed to remain calm, even though she had sustained serious injuries: 2 stab wounds to her face and 2 to her neck. In total, the attacker had stabbed her 9 times, with one wound puncturing her left lung and another coming dangerously close to her heart. The trial of Edwin Alemany started in 2015 and lasted for 14 days. The key witness for the prosecution was Kaylee, the survivor. During her testimony, she displayed such inner strength that Edwin could not even look her in the eye. Alexander Cruz, the first victim, also testified against him. Edwin's defense attorney attempted to downplay his violent behavior, arguing that Edwin had tried to end his own life by cutting his wrists, which resulted in scratches on his neck and arms. Ultimately, Edwin was found guilty of first-degree murder for Amy's death, armed robbery, aggravated assault with a weapon, and attempted murder of Kaylee Ballantyne and Alexander Cruz. He never accepted responsibility or showed any regret for his actions. On June 9, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Amy and received an additional 35 years for the attacks on Kaylee and Alexander. When Kaylee gave her final statement, she shared her challenges in trying to live a normal life. Her heartfelt words brought many people in the courtroom to tears. Amy's parents gave Kaylee their late daughter's necklace as a token of gratitude for her testimony, which helped convict a dangerous criminal. However, Edwin, the criminal, never showed any remorse. In October 2020, he approached a federal judge to complain that his lawyers had been ineffective by opting for an insanity defense and admitting his guilt without his consent, despite him claiming he was innocent. In 2021, the state Supreme Court upheld his conviction. Edwin then hired a new lawyer and tried to formulate a different strategy to gain immediate release by pointing out the mistakes made by his previous attorney and the prosecution. However, these attempts were unsuccessful. After Kaylee recovered from her injuries, she returned to school and graduated from university. She lived in Boston until Edwin's case was resolved. After that, she decided to move to California to find peace away from big cities, hoping to cope with her post-traumatic stress disorder. Gradually, she healed from her psychological trauma and even began to dream again, which felt like a significant achievement. During this period, she felt intense anger towards Edwin for taking Amy's life and nearly ending hers too. Kaylee struggled to understand what could drive someone to such senseless cruelty. Over time, however, she began to feel pity for Edwin, recognizing the flaws in his character that led to his actions. Eventually, she wrote him a letter of forgiveness, but never sent it. It remained in her desk for 2 years. Then Kaylee tried to contact Edwin's lawyer, but received no response. Later, during a sermon about forgiveness at her church, she was reminded of the man who nearly took her life. Coincidentally, the pastor was visiting the prison where Edwin was held, so Kaylee asked him to deliver her letter. 2 weeks later, she received a response. In his letter, Edwin discussed his hard childhood. He was born in Puerto Rico and moved to the United States without speaking English. He shared the difficulties he encountered both at work and in his personal life, including experiences of bullying during his childhood. These challenges resulted in behavioral issues that ultimately led to him being in juvenile prison for a significant part of his youth. Initially, Kaylee felt compassion for him after reading the letter, but a few weeks later, she discovered that he was trying to appeal his case, claiming that his tough upbringing had broken him. This revelation made her question his sincerity, as she suspected he was trying to gain her sympathy. As a result, she decided not to reply to him. In the end, his appeal was denied, and he remains in prison. Kaylee hopes he is attending school and working on self-improvement. She believes he didn't ruin her life. Instead, he improved it. Kaylee has decided to turn her circumstances into something positive and feels happier than ever. Even though she faces daily anxiety and various challenges, she continues attending therapy and strives to maintain a positive outlook. After spending some time in California, she returned to Maine, where she currently resides. As a public speaker, she shares her story to inspire and support others who have experienced trauma. About a year ago, she stepped back from public speaking and is now seeking new ways to share her message. Kaylee feels passionate about her story because it has the potential to connect with others and create positive change in their lives. Currently, she works in marketing, is in a loving relationship, and has recently purchased her first home. Betrayal in relationships is not a legal crime, but it is a conscious act that harms someone who has trusted you deeply. This betrayal can lead to significant emotional pain and can sometimes escalate into situations that involve actual crimes. The story of Kathy Cho was unusual from the start. Investigators first thought she might have run away from her strict parents, been kidnapped by one of her many online followers, or taken an impulsive trip with someone without informing anyone. There were even rumors suggesting that her parents could be involved in her disappearance. Sadly, Kathy was never seen alive again. For over a year, the investigation went nowhere until unexpected clues emerged from an unlikely source. Shockingly, the culprit had been hiding in plain sight the entire time and even managed to pass a lie detector test. Kathy's parents came from a small province in Taiwan. In 1989, they moved to the United States in search of a better life and settled in Renton, Washington, which is close to Seattle. At that time, they spoke very little English, which made it hard for them to adjust to their new surroundings. They led a private and isolated life, seldom interacting with neighbors or the local community. On November 29, 1990, they had their only child, a daughter named Kathy Cho. Unlike her parents, who found it challenging to connect with others, Kathy was a cheerful, outgoing, and lively young woman. She had a natural ability to make friends, but her upbringing was strict, influenced by her parents' cultural values and traditions. Kathy was not allowed to invite friends over and had to report where she was, with whom at all times. As she got older, the restrictive environment at home became more challenging for her. Even though Kathy followed her parents' rules, she often felt constrained and isolated. In high school, she set up multiple profiles on social media, where she openly shared information about herself, her interests, her experiences. These platforms allowed her to connect with others and escape some of her parents' limitations. She even developed a modest following online, which helped her deal with the lack of freedom in her everyday life. As Kathy started dating and expressing interest in boys, her father's disapproval became more intense. Her father criticized every young man she interacted with, as he strongly disapproved of the relaxed and independent lifestyles of American teenagers. He was convinced that his daughter should marry someone from Taiwan rather than a local man. He frequently shared his growing disappointment with life in America with his wife, expressing regrets about immigrating and often mentioning his wish to return to their homeland. In the fall of 2009, 18-year-old Kathy Cho was in her senior year of high school when she started dating Ezekiel James Watkins, who was 2.5 years older than her. They had known each other since their teenage years. As Ezekiel also attended Renton High School, their relationship lasted only a couple of months, and during that time, Ezekiel never visited Kathy's home. Instead, they met in neutral locations or spent time at Ezekiel's apartment, which he shared with a friend. This was because Kathy's father, Mr. Chu, strongly disapproved of Ezekiel due to his unconventional appearance and bold behavior. Ezekiel was a musician and a popular figure, known for frequently changing girlfriends. Kathy was thrilled when he showed interest in her and was so determined to continue seeing him that she sometimes lied to her father and defied her parents' wishes to sneak out for dates with Ezekiel. After the new year, Kathy's relationship with Ezekiel ended just as quickly as it had begun. Ezekiel lost interest in her and soon started dating other young women, one of whom was Kathy's classmates. This situation deeply hurt Kathy, whether it was intentional or not. She had truly loved Ezekiel. He was her first serious boyfriend. Their relationship felt special and full of promise. Kathy was determined to win him back. Initially, those close to Kathy and Ezekiel believed they had separated amicably and remained friends. Kathy soon began dating other young men, probably to demonstrate to herself, others, and especially Ezekiel, that she was still attractive. Unfortunately, this unconventional method combined with her frantic efforts to rekindle her relationship with Ezekiel, ultimately resulted in a tragedy. On April 19, 2010, Kathy's parents reported their daughter missing to the local police. The night before, Kathy had gone out with friends, taking only her phone, and failed to come home. Her parents expected her back by 8:30 p.m., but when she didn't return, her father called her. Kathy ignored her father's calls, which only added to their worries. At 9:30 p.m., they received a message from Kathy. She said she was having coffee with a friend at Westfield South Center Mall and would be home a bit late. Although this made her father frustrated, he and her mother waited patiently for her return. However, when midnight passed and Kathy still hadn't come home and her phone was turned off, her parents became increasingly worried. They started calling Kathy's friends, but none of them had seen her that night. Concerned, her parents decided to go to the shopping mall themselves. By the time they arrived, Westfield South Center Mall was closed, except for the movie theater and a few cafes, but there was no sign of Kathy. The tension in the Chow household was rising, but her parents still hoped their daughter, Kathy, had just stayed out too late and would come home soon. By morning, when they hadn't heard from her, they decided to go to the police station to report her missing. Kathy's absence from school that day worried her teachers and classmates, as she was a responsible student who never skipped classes without a good reason. This led her parents to suspect that she might have lied to them and gone on a date. The big question was, who was she with? This was something the police would need to investigate. The investigators approached her disappearance with great urgency right from the start. They quickly began searching for her, interviewing her friends and acquaintances to gather any potential leads. Unfortunately, their initial efforts didn't yield any useful information. Detectives contacted Kathy's cell phone provider and found that her phone last connected to a network at 9:30 p.m. from a local park next to a large, marshy area. This discovery raised serious concerns. Kathy had not been at the mall as she had said. Instead, she had been in the park, where she sent her last message to her father before turning off her phone, which has remained off since then. Detectives decided to start their investigation by interviewing Kathy's ex-boyfriend, Ezekiel Watkins. When he was brought in for questioning, he appeared noticeably anxious and genuinely concerned about Kathy's disappearance. Ezekiel explained that he and Kathy had broken up around 3 months ago, but had continued to be friends. He mentioned that they had both moved on and were dating other people, so there were no hard feelings between them. He also suggested that Kathy might have been dating multiple people simultaneously, although he admitted he didn't know the names of any of her new romantic interests. When asked about his activities on the night his ex-girlfriend, Kathy Cho, went missing, Ezekiel stated that he was at home with his roommate, John Carpenter. They lived together and spent the evening playing video games until about 3 a.m., after which they went to sleep. John, neighbor, who was also acquainted with Kathy from school, confirmed Ezekiel's alibi and was willing to assist the police with their investigation. Ezekiel acknowledged that Kathy had sent him a message earlier in the evening, asking to meet. However, he turned her down, claiming he was busy because he wasn't interested in going out. He revealed that Kathy frequently tried to reach out to him, and he believed she wanted to talk about their past relationship. To avoid that conversation, he chose to make an excuse. Ezekiel's story initially appeared credible, but investigators were hesitant to rule him out as a suspect. His alibi was only supported by his roommate, prompting detectives to request that Ezekiel take a polygraph test. After some hesitation, he consented. The test results generally supported his version of events, though a few of his answers were somewhat ambiguous. Investigators considered these discrepancies to be minor and within the normal margin of error. In the end, they concluded that Ezekiel was unlikely to be connected to Kathy's disappearance and allowed him to leave after the questioning. However, questions remained about what Kathy's parents might be concealing. Kathy's friends noted that she was very active on social media and dating websites, where she often met new people. Recently, she had been on dates with several young men, yet no one seemed to know who these individuals were. Investigators believed that many answers to their questions could be found on Kathy's laptop, which included her accounts and private messages. However, they faced a major obstacle when Kathy's parents refused to allow them to enter the house, search her room, or take any of her personal items. This behavior raised suspicions among the investigators, who felt the parents might be hiding something. The police attempted to explain to Mr. and Mrs. Kanchu that Kathy's laptop could hold important clues, possibly even the identity of someone who could have harmed her or been involved in her disappearance. To find this information, specialists needed access to her online accounts. Despite this, her parents were uncooperative. They insisted on taking the laptop to a programmer they knew, claiming they would first review the contents themselves before handing everything over to the police. On April 21st, investigators called Kathy's parents in for questioning and recommended that they take a polygraph test. Kathy's mother immediately became upset and said she couldn't go through with it. Kathy's father, though hesitant, agreed to the test but appeared very anxious. During the test, he had intense emotional responses, often crying as he answered questions. Ultimately, he did not pass the polygraph, which heightened the suspicions about her parents. Detectives were eager to find the truth, so they interviewed the neighbors of the Chows, and their insights were interesting. The neighbors reported that Chus had moved into the house in 1989 after immigrating to the United States, but over the 20 years since, they had not formed any close relationships. The Cho family was known for being reclusive. They rarely socialized, never invited anyone to their home, avoided visiting others. Even Kathy's friends had never been allowed inside. The Chus were not considered rude. They simply preferred to maintain their privacy. They were very protective of Kathy's reputation and were cautious about her friends and social activities. This concern, investigators believed, explained their reluctance to hand over the laptop. They wanted to understand what their daughter had been involved in first. The reason they failed the polygraph test was quite straightforward. She had been missing for 3 days, so her parents were extremely emotional, filled with worry, fear, and grief. The investigator realized that their mental and emotional state would likely affect their ability to pass the test. A few days later, Kathy's father came back to the police station on his own with Kathy's laptop. This time, he agreed to take another polygraph test, and the results indicated that he was telling the truth, clearing him of any involvement in his daughter's disappearance. Kathy's parents were worried about her admirers, fearing that her laptop might contain private photos or videos that could damage her reputation. They wanted to keep everything private. Fortunately, nothing concerning was found. However, investigators learned that Kathy had been chatting online with 8 different young men and had gone on at least a couple of dates with each of them. Kathy enjoyed the attention from these young men and often bragged about it to her friends, leading some to speculate that she might have been trying to make Ezekiel jealous. Regardless of her reasons, the police had to investigate all of these young men for any connection to Kathy's disappearance. Thanks to her message history, the police were able to gather their names, phone numbers, and the dates and locations of Kathy's meetings with them. In the following days, detectives successfully located all 8 individuals and brought them in for questioning. The youngest was 17 and the oldest was 24. Kathy had met each of them online, and they did not know one another prior to this. She had reached out to them and arranged the meetings, but it was evident that she had not formed a serious relationship with any of them. However, investigators were considering whether one of them might have developed intense feelings for Kathy, potentially leading to possessiveness or jealousy. 5 of the young men provided strong, confirmed alibis for the night Kathy went missing. 2 were out of town. 1 was working an overnight shift. Another was in the hospital recovering from a car accident, and 1 spent the entire night at a bar with friends, which was verified by security camera footage. The last 3, who lacked solid alibis, voluntarily took polygraph tests and were cleared of any suspicion regarding Kathy's disappearance, leading the investigation to a standstill. For several weeks, search teams thoroughly explored the marshy area behind the park where Kathy's phone signal was last detected. Despite their extensive efforts, they found no evidence of her. Investigators also struggled to find witnesses who might have seen Kathy in the park that evening. Flyers featuring Kathy's photo were distributed across the city, and social media groups were created where friends and acquaintances exchanged information, theories about her disappearance. News outlets covered the case, urging anyone with relevant information to come forward. The police received hundreds of tips from people claiming to have seen Kathy the night she disappeared or later in various parts of the city. Unfortunately, every lead turned out to be a false alarm, as these sightings involved different young women who resembled her, often of Asian descent. The investigation quickly hit a dead end, with no new evidence, leads, or witnesses to pursue, and progress came to a standstill. By this time, most people believed that Kathy was no longer alive. However, the questions about what happened to her and who was responsible still existed. There was a lingering fear that a dangerous individual remained at large, posing a potential threat to others. In the summer of 2011, police received a call from Giovanni Candelario, who claimed to have crucial information about Kathy's disappearance. Giovanni was a friend of John Carpenter, the roommate of Ezekiel Watkins. He had been temporarily living in their apartment since April of the previous year due to a fight with his girlfriend, but he had not been mentioned in the investigation and had never been questioned by the police. Giovanni stated that he knew Kathy through mutual friends, although they were not very close. He informed the police that on the night Kathy disappeared, April 18, 2010, Ezekiel did not come home at 8 p.m., as he had previously said. Instead, Giovanni remembered Ezekiel arriving closer to midnight and asked to borrow a shovel to bury a duck. At that time, Giovanni was playing a video game but noticed that Ezekiel was covered in mud. When Giovanni inquired about it, Ezekiel explained that he had been riding his bike off-road, fell into a puddle, and got dirty. Shortly after this, Ezekiel asked John Carpenter to go outside with him. Giovanni wasn't sure how long they were gone because he had fallen asleep. When detectives questioned Giovanni about why he hadn't come forward earlier, he explained that he hadn't considered the detail important at the time. Since Ezekiel was quickly cleared as a suspect, Giovanni also was never prompted to give a statement. Candelario said he did not suspect anything at the time. However, in the following months, he noticed a significant change in Watkins's demeanor and began to question the incident. Initially, investigators doubted Giovanni's story. They thought he might have had a conflict with Ezekiel and was seeking revenge. However, they needed to confirm his claims, so detectives brought John Carpenter in for further questioning. A startling confession emerged. At first, Carpenter maintained the same story he had told a year ago, but when detectives presented him with Giovanni's testimony, his attitude noticeably shifted. He paused and questioned, "What kind of sentence will I get for concealing a crime? Is there a way to lessen it if I cooperate?" Understanding the seriousness of his predicament, Carpenter made a deal with the police. In return for a lighter sentence, he promised to provide all the information he had and to disclose the location of Kathy's remains. Carpenter tried hard to downplay his involvement in the events, maintaining that he never intended to lie to the investigators. He explained that he chose to stay silent out of fear that Ezekiel might hurt him as well. Carpenter stated that Ezekiel came home around midnight that night, covered in mud. He also remembered noticing a recent cut near Ezekiel's ear, which had been overlooked during the investigation because Ezekiel had a beard back then. Ezekiel Watkins confided in his roommate, John Carpenter, about a shocking incident that could change everything. He asked John for help and requested a small shovel from the trunk of his car. The two then made their way to a marshy area behind the park, walking through about 50 yards of thick underbrush. They stopped near the body of Katie Chu. Ezekiel explained that her death was accidental and that he was only acting in self-defense. He pleaded with John to help him conceal the body. Together, they dragged Katie's body further into the dense thicket, covering several more yards until it became nearly impossible to move. There, they dug a shallow grave, placed her inside, and covered her with dirt, branches, Even a year later, John could show investigators the exact burial location by using a large fallen tree as a reference point. Ezekiel was arrested the same day, but firmly maintained that he did not commit a crime, claiming it was an accident. He acknowledged that he had agreed to meet Kathy after she texted him, but he stated that she was aggressive and confrontational during their encounter. Ezekiel mentioned that Kathy was still trying to resolve their differences and had expressed this to him. To keep a low profile, Ezekiel suggested they walk to a nearby marshy area to talk. However, the argument intensified once they arrived. Ezekiel said that Kathy's behavior became even more intense. At one point, he took out a knife he always carried, claiming he did not intend to harm her, but wanted to frighten her enough to leave him alone so he could go. When Kathy saw the knife, she allegedly rushed at him and hit his arm, resulting in him accidentally cutting himself. A struggle followed. Ezekiel claimed he didn't know how the knife ended up in Kathy's neck. When he realized she was no longer breathing, he panicked. Instead of calling for help, he went home and asked John for help without fully explaining the situation. Although shocked, John agreed to help him hide the body. Together, they created a false story and stuck to it. Giovanni Candelario was staying in their apartment without anyone's knowledge, so he was not questioned by the police during the early investigation. When Kathy's body was found in a shallow grave, it was in such an advanced state of decomposition that DNA testing was necessary to confirm her identity. However, the forensic evidence contradicted Ezekiel's account of what happened. The medical examiner found more than a dozen knife wounds on Kathy, including a fatal cut to her throat, which was likely the cause of her death. This was clearly not an accident. It was a brutal and deliberate act. Despite the substantial evidence against him, Ezekiel maintained his innocence, claiming it was self-defense and that Kathy was accidentally hurt during their struggle. Investigators also discovered that the last message sent from Kathy's phone to her father was actually written and sent by Ezekiel, indicating he was trying to delay the discovery of her disappearance. During the trial, Ezekiel admitted that Kathy had been stalking him and trying to interfere with his new relationship. However, he denied that he had meant to hurt her. Giovanni, who provided important information, was not charged and remained a witness in the case. John Carpenter, who was Ezekiel's roommate and agreed to help investigators, received a suspended sentence for hiding evidence and lying in his testimony. Ezekiel Watkins pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. However, Watkins was eventually convicted and sentenced to 27 years in prison. As a result, without the possibility of parole, Watkins remains incarcerated at the Washington Correctional Center in Shelton, Washington. Kathy Cho's life, radiant and full of promise, was stolen in 2010 by the one she once trusted, Ezekiel Watkins. His betrayal, a knife through her heart and her family's, left Renton, Washington, reeling for her Taiwanese immigrant parents, who cradled dreams of a better life. Kathy's loss was a wound deepened by their silent isolation. Her social media posts, a cry for freedom, led investigators to her killer but revealed the perils of her digital world. Renton's community, united in grief, lit candles at vigils and plastered her smile on flyers, refusing to let her fade. Giovanni Candelario's courage unveiled the truth, securing Ezekiel's 27-year sentence. Kathy's spirit endures in Renton High's quiet memorials and new safety lessons, whispering to us all, cherish those who shine, guard their trust, and hold fast to hope in the face of heartbreak. Before the summer of 1988, the Carr family enjoyed a happy life in the small town of Alturas. They were known for their strong faith and attended church every Sunday, embodying a peaceful, trouble-free family. However, their calm life was disrupted on June 14th, when 17-year-old Dwayne found a threatening letter in their mailbox. The anonymous note was alarming, warning the family to leave Florida or face serious consequences. Distressed, Dwayne quickly showed the letter to his parents. His mother, Peggy, was filled with fear, while his father, Pi, dismissed it as a prank. As summer transitioned into fall, the family's anxiety increased, peaking on October 23rd when Peggy suddenly became seriously ill. She suffered from intense nausea and severe pain, and strikingly, her hair began to fall out in large clumps. Despite her worsening condition, Pi insisted on not taking Peggy to the hospital, thinking it was just a temporary illness. However, Peggy's health rapidly deteriorated, and within a week, she fell into a coma. To make matters worse, Dwayne started showing the same troubling symptoms as his mother. This alarming situation led to a police investigation. On December 2nd, authorities made a shocking discovery. The sickness affecting the Carr family was caused by thallium, a deadly chemical often used in rat poison. Tests revealed that every family member, including Pi, had dangerously high levels of this poison in their bodies. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that someone was deliberately targeting the Carr family. The letter they received was not a joke. It was a warning of the danger ahead. Authorities now had to work quickly to identify the person responsible and prevent further harm. Turn back time. In 1988, Dwayne was happily living with his family in the peaceful town of Alturas, Florida. His mother, Peggy, worked hard as a waitress at a local diner. After raising 3 children by herself, she found love with Pi Carr, who had 2 children of his own, creating a blended family. Life in Alturas seemed perfect. It was a quiet place where people left their doors unlocked, ideal for raising a family. However, on October 23rd, everything changed in a tragic way. Early in the morning, Peggy went to work as usual. However, shortly after arriving at the diner, she began experiencing a burning sensation in her legs and feet, followed by severe chest pain. She was quickly taken to the hospital, where her condition left her nearly incapacitated. Despite extensive tests, doctors were unable to determine the cause of her symptoms and sent her home with pain relief medication. A week later, on October 30th, Peggy and Dwayne, along with Dwayne's stepbrother, Travis, were taken to the hospital with severe symptoms. The pain was so intense that they were brought to tears, and they were scared for their lives. Peggy was admitted to the intensive care unit, where an infectious disease specialist noticed something troubling, suggesting possible poisoning. He decided to test for thallium, a toxic substance banned in the US since 1972, but still found in some old rat poisons. The test results were shocking. Peggy had 50 times the deadly amount of thallium in her body. The following day, October 31st, she fell into a coma. Travis needed a respirator, and Dwayne showed no signs of getting better. The police quickly started an investigation with a clear goal: to identify the source of the poisoning and prevent more harm. They searched the orange groves, tested the neighborhood's water supply, and even investigated the diner where Peggy worked, but found no signs of thallium. As news broke, panic spread through the community. Concerned citizens demanded answers, anxious about their safety. Investigators arrived at the Carr home, carefully collecting dust samples and over 400 household items for testing. One item of particular concern was a 6-pack of Coke bottles, 3 of which were unopened. Tests showed that each bottle contained more than a gram of thallium, enough to be lethal to an adult. The lead detective understood that there were 2 possible explanations. Either the Coke had been tampered with at the factory, or it had been contaminated elsewhere. If it was factory tampering, many more people might have consumed the poison, potentially affecting not just the county, but the entire state or even the nation. This fear led locals to hesitate before drinking Coke. The investigation initially targeted the bottling company. However, thanks to Coca-Cola's cooperation, it was quickly determined that large-scale tampering was not possible. It was found that tampering with the product at the plant could not physically happen. As a result, the police concluded that this was a deliberate attack on Peggy Carr and her family. The investigation focused on family members, with Peggy's husband, Pi Carr, becoming a key suspect. Although they had been married for just 7 months, their initial happiness had faded quickly. Pi spent long hours working at the mine, which made Peggy increasingly suspicious of him. One night, she caught him with another woman, further deepening her concerns. During the weekend that Peggy became ill, Pi happened to be out of town. When he returned, he was reluctant to take her to the hospital. As investigators looked further into Pi's past, they tried to find a reason why he would poison his wife. However, one question continued to trouble the police. Why would Pi also poison his own son, Travis? During the interrogation, Pi shared an intriguing piece of information. On June 14th, 4 months before Peggy got sick, Dwayne discovered a letter in the mailbox. Inside, there was a yellow post-it note with a typewritten warning telling the family to leave Florida within 2 weeks or they would face death. At first, Dwayne and his siblings found it funny, but now Pi's lack of concern appeared more suspicious. The police discovered that unsettling events had previously occurred in the Carr household. A few years earlier, 2 of their dogs had died unexpectedly, showing signs of severe illness and hair loss. This raised a disturbing possibility that they might have been subjected to experimentation. As Peggy's condition worsened, Dwayne and Travis showed no signs of getting better. The entire family was tested for thallium. The results were shocking. Every family member, including Pi Carr, had trace amounts of thallium in their system. This finding ruled Pi out as a suspect, since it seemed unlikely that someone would commit such a crime while also risking their own exposure to the poison. Even Peggy's 2-year-old granddaughter, Casey, had traces of thallium. On March 3, 1989, after 5 months of suffering, Peggy's health took a tragic turn for the worse. Dwayne was summoned to her bedside one last time as the family made the painful decision to take her off life support. Peggy Carr passed away at the age of 41, leaving her family in deep sorrow. Peggy's death shifted the investigation to a murder case. Poisoning is an unusual and deliberate method of killing, typically associated with a particularly clever and disturbed individual. When the FBI examined the contaminated Coke bottles, they discovered tiny scratch marks, suggesting that the bottles had been carefully altered. Thallium had been added, the caps resealed, and the bottles looked untouched. Since thallium is both tasteless and odorless, it dissolves easily without leaving typical signs like overflow, discoloration, or sediment in soda. The careful mixture found in the Coke bottles indicates that the perpetrator possessed advanced chemistry knowledge, an exceptionally intelligent person who thought they were more cunning than everyone else. Police began to interview neighbors and townspeople in Alturas, a small community with only a few hundred residents, as they searched for the person responsible for this terrible crime. The closest neighbors to the Carr family were George James Trepal and his wife, Diana. When detectives questioned Trepal, he reacted with surprising anger, criticizing the redneck children and family living nearby. When asked who anyone would want to harm the Carr family, George gave a disturbingly detailed answer. He believed someone wanted them to move away. This was exactly the same message found in a threatening letter sent to the Carrs, a detail known only to the police. This unusual response led investigators to consider Trepal as a prime suspect. Further investigation revealed that George was a self-taught chemist, while his wife, Diana, held a master's degree in chemistry. Both were part of an elite society for individuals with an IQ in the top 2% of the population. Investigators then uncovered George's criminal history. He had previously served time in prison for his role as the chemist in a large methamphetamine operation. One key ingredient used in making methamphetamine is thallium. The news that George was a person of interest surprised even Peggy's son, Dwayne, who found it hard to believe that Trepal was capable of such a terrible crime. The detectives found out that Trepal had a prior altercation with the Carr family over loud music. Just 2 days after this dispute, Peggy Carr was poisoned. Although there were connections between the two events, the police did not have sufficient evidence to arrest Trepal. Typically, police procedures involve questioning a suspect in hopes of securing a confession. However, detectives felt this tactic would not be effective with Trepal, who is introverted and avoids confrontation. Therefore, the FBI suggested an alternative approach. Someone needed to go undercover to outwit Trepal. The police assigned Special Agent to go undercover in the group that George Treppel was part of. The goal was to earn Treppel's trust and collect enough evidence to demonstrate his involvement in the poisoning. At first, it appeared that the agent would only need to work undercover for a weekend. However, she was cautioned about Treppel's exceptional memory. If he saw her, he might remember her face or car. She, using a fake identity, was getting ready to attend a murder mystery event organized by George Treppel and his wife, Diana. She pretended to be a woman about to divorce her abusive husband. On April 14, 1989, she arrived at the local hotel where the gathering was taking place. As she entered, she was met by George himself. Seeing him, she felt anxious that he might recognize her from previous surveillance. She took a deep breath and looked for any indication that he knew her, but Treppel didn't seem to remember her. Still, she had to stay alert in her undercover role. She understood that Treppel was not likely to confront someone directly. He preferred to poison his victims, leading to a slow and painful death. The agent signed up for the event and received a packet with all the weekend details prepared by Treppel himself. The pamphlet outlined several carefully crafted murder scenarios, including one that involved poisoning. One paragraph caught her attention. It stated that when a death threat arrives, cautious individuals should discard all their food and be mindful of what they consume. This alarming similarity reminded she of the death threat the Carr family had received just before Peggy was poisoned, reinforcing her belief that they had identified the right suspect. Throughout the weekend, the agent spoke with Treppel, carefully monitoring his every word, aware that any mistake could cost her life. When Treppel inquired about her background, she fabricated a story about her husband, a lawyer from Houston, Texas, whom she claimed to have left. Treppel revealed that he could detect lies by observing the movement of a person's neck muscles, which made she even more anxious. Before the weekend concluded, she revealed to Treppel her plan to move to Florida in order to escape her husband. This confession led to an important development. Treppel mentioned that he and his wife were considering relocating their practice and selling their house. After meeting with her supervisors, the agent was told to extend her undercover operation beyond the original weekend. She recognized this as an opportunity to gather important evidence that could lead to a search warrant for Treppel's house. Her goal was to find lab equipment or chemicals that would connect Treppel to the crime. The next week, she visited Treppel's house. During the visit, Treppel bragged about how safe Alturas was and how nobody locked their doors. While she spotted several suspicious items, such as a secret passage in the library and a mannequin dressed in bondage gear, none of these were enough to obtain a search warrant. Despite her failed plan, the agent continued to act, committed to collecting more evidence. She understood the dangers involved. Revealing her real identity could put her and her family at risk. Treppel, who was very clever, might resort to poisoning her if he found out she was an undercover detective. Over the next few months, she met with Treppel for several lunch dates, always being watched closely. She avoided eating or drinking anything after leaving the table. Cautious of Treppel's potential to harm her, during these meetings, Treppel progressively showed his contempt for those he deemed less intelligent, which provided she with a glimpse into his mindset. After 8 months, the agent had gathered many small pieces of evidence, but it wasn't enough to form a strong case. Her supervisors started to doubt the operation's worth and considered shutting it down. For the agent, giving up was not an option. She felt a deep responsibility to seek justice for Peggy Carr and her family, thinking about how it could have been her own loved ones who ingested the poison. In December 1989, the agent received an important call she had been anticipating. George and Diana Treppel had relocated and offered her the opportunity to move into their home. With this offer, the agent gained legal permission to enter the house without needing a warrant, allowing her to invite the county crime scene unit to conduct an investigation. Suspecting that Treppel was too intelligent to leave obvious signs of thallium, the investigation team concentrated on searching for residues in areas such as the air conditioning filter and drains. The house still contained many of Treppel's belongings, which provided plenty of chances to collect samples. In the garage, investigators found vials and chemistry bottles, hoping that one of them would test positive for thallium. While waiting for results from the FBI lab, the agent struggling to come up with new ways to engage Treppel. As time passed, she realized that by January 1990, with no updates from the lab, she needed to take matters into her own hands. She aimed to trick Treppel into incriminating himself, not knowing that he was preparing his own deception. The agent scheduled a meeting with Treppel at a picnic area behind a McDonald's, near where he lived. This important meeting was recorded. During their discussion, she gave Treppel a business card that she claimed had been left by detectives looking for him. Treppel reacted noticeably. He became very anxious and visibly unsettled as he tried to stay calm. He repeatedly invited she to visit his new house, but she declined. The atmosphere was tense, leaving one to wonder what would have happened if she had accepted his invitation. After the meeting, Treppel appeared visibly shaken and deeply impacted by the news from her. This marked a critical moment in the investigation. On April 4, 1990, the agent received an unexpected phone call. The FBI had found thallium in one of the vials taken from Treppel's garage. The vial contained thallium nitrate, the same chemical used to poison Peggy Carr and to try to kill her entire family. This discovery provided crucial evidence to bolster the case against Treppel. On April 5th, George Treppel was arrested at his new home in Seguin. Seeing him led into the county jail in an orange jumpsuit marked the conclusion of a lengthy and dangerous investigation. Even when the agent revealed her true identity, Treppel remained calm. The special agent from the county sheriff's office presented him with a warrant for handwriting samples, to which Treppel simply smiled and said, "Oh, okay." She had narrowly escaped becoming Treppel's next victim. In January 1991, George Treppel's trial began with substantial evidence against him. Police found a journal in Treppel's home called General Poisoning Guides, which identified thallium as a common poison used by criminals. The journal included references to harming neighbors, and 55 fingerprints found in it matched Treppel's. The prosecution also presented the tools used to tamper with the Coke bottles, including a set of tiny screwdrivers. One screwdriver was missing and fit perfectly with the marks on the bottle caps, which was incriminating evidence that shocked the jury. Throughout the trial, Treppel maintained a calm and emotionless demeanor, even smiling at times. His lack of remorse and his premeditated actions revealed a disturbing level of malice. He rationalized his cruel actions by claiming he was more intelligent than others and believed that those he deemed less intelligent did not have the right to live. The trial lasted for 2 months, but the jury took only 4 hours to reach a decision. On March 6, 1991, nearly 2 years after Peggy Carr's death, George Treppel was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to death. According to the Florida Department of Corrections, inmates on death row wait an average of 12.7 years for execution. Treppel passed that milestone nearly 8 years ago. With this verdict, justice was served for Peggy Carr. The special agent's unwavering dedication and bravery played a crucial role in bringing this criminal to justice. She put her life at risk to ensure that Treppel was held accountable for his horrific actions. Reflecting on her commitment, one can't help but admire her courage. She went above and beyond to ensure that Peggy's killer faced justice, earning the respect and gratitude of many. The other members of Peggy Carr's family, who also experienced poisoning, fully recovered. However, the loss of Peggy deeply affected her son Dwayne. Losing his mother at just 16 years old was a traumatic event that left him with lasting emotional pain. In the years after her passing, Dwayne struggled with his grief, frequently expressing it through anger and emotional outbursts. Eventually, he discovered comfort in writing letters to his mother, where he shared his feelings. He promised to work on improving his life. Dwayne fulfilled his promise. Today, he is married and is the supportive father his family needs. Each day, he works hard to make his mother proud and honor her memory. Dwayne exemplifies the strength of the human spirit. proving that even after facing great tragedy, it is possible to live a meaningful life. On the night of November 25th to 26, 2022, in the quiet French village of Prahek, 22-year-old Leslie Hurlbecker and 21-year-old Kevin Trompat went missing. They had come to Prahek for a relaxing getaway with friends. However, the next morning, their belongings were still there, but they were nowhere to be found. What happened that night? Leslie Hurlbecker grew up in a small town near Prahek, where she created many cherished memories with her family during her childhood. Her mother was always supportive of Leslie's interests and hobbies. After her mother's passing, Leslie found it difficult to cope, but her twin brother provided strong support, helping her maintain her self-confidence. They shared a deep bond and valued even the smallest moments together. Known for her outgoing nature, Leslie had a talent for connecting with others. Her friends and acquaintances recognized her love for animals, especially her dog Onyx, who was more than just a pet. He was her true companion. Leslie often remarked that Onyx understood her emotions better than anyone else. After finishing school, Leslie launched her own house painting business, dedicating herself fully to it. Her company gradually expanded and gained new clients. Leslie felt immense pride in creating something from the ground up. To her, it was more than just a job. It represented her independence and personal success. Kevin Trompat faced difficult challenges growing up. With his father in prison, Kevin had to mature quickly and hide his vulnerabilities, striving to be a strong support for his family. Despite these hardships, he remained kind and enjoyed sharing his passions with friends. One of his favorite activities was exploring nature. He frequently went hiking, took long bike rides, and appreciated the outdoors. Kevin dreamed of making this love for nature a central part of his life. He purchased an old van, started converting it, hoping to travel and possibly work from it in the future. Leslie and Kevin met at a party thrown by their mutual friend, Tom Trullet. They began with light conversation, but it soon became clear that they shared many interests. Leslie discussed her business goals, while Kevin talked about his plans for converting a van. Right from their initial conversation, their connection felt authentic. There were no facades, just two people being their true selves. Their relationship developed rapidly. In just a few weeks, they became close companions, enjoying each other's company, discussing future travels together. Leslie was excited that Kevin shared her passion for animals and encouraged her interests. Kevin, on the other hand, appreciated her honesty and her talent for really listening. In November, Leslie and Kevin planned a short escape from their daily routines. They picked Prahek, a quaint rural town in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region of western France, which has a population of just over 2,000. It is known for its tranquility and welcoming atmosphere, making it an ideal destination. Their simple plan was to spend one night in Prahek before heading to Bordeaux, a city they had always wanted to visit. They intended for this to be a relaxed getaway for the two of them, reconnecting with friends and enjoying a new environment. That night, Leslie and Kevin stayed with their friends, Tom Trullet and Nicolas Renaud, whose homes were only 30 feet apart. They arrived in Prahek on the evening of November 25th and left some belongings at Tom's house. With their dog, Onyx, they then went to Nicholas's house to spend time together. They brought only a few essentials for the night. The atmosphere at Nicholas's home was relaxed, featuring music, drinks, and friendly conversations. Leslie and Kevin seemed at ease as they discussed their future plans, showing no signs of concern. Nicholas welcomed them warmly, and everything appeared to be normal. No one could have predicted that it would be their last night together. Leslie and Kevin only intended to stay briefly at Nicholas's house. Most of their belongings were still at Tom's place, and Onyx, their pet, was with them as usual. Leslie always brought him along. According to Nicholas, the night was like any normal gathering among friends, filled with casual conversations about life and future plans, without any issues. Around 3 a.m., Leslie and Kevin decided to return to Tom's house. Nicholas offered them a place to stay for the night, but they politely declined, preferring to sleep at Tom's where their things were. His house was just 30 feet away, and they felt confident they could get there without any problems. Then, Leslie and Kevin left Nicholas's house with their dog. They headed towards Tom's. That was the last sighting of them. They never arrived at Tom's place. Their clothes and belongings were still at Tom's, which concerned friends and family. By the next morning, it became evident that something was wrong because neither Leslie nor Kevin had contacted anyone, which was unusual for them. Nicholas informed the authorities that the evening had been calm, that they appeared to be fine. When law enforcement searched Tom's house, they found no evidence of a struggle. This marked the start of a complicated search that only grew more challenging over time. Family members were certain that Leslie and Kevin would never just vanish without notice. Leslie frequently communicated with her twin brother, and Kevin always informed his family before leaving. Initially, investigators considered the idea that the couple might have voluntarily left Prague without telling anyone. However, both families dismissed this theory, insisting it was impossible. Additionally, all of their belongings were still at Tom's house, suggesting they had only stepped away briefly with plans to return soon. Law enforcement launched an extensive search in the nearby area, including forests, open fields, all potential roads or paths Leslie and Kevin may have used that night. Local volunteers, residents, neighbors, and friends who were familiar with the area also participated in the search, determined to find any clues that could help locate Leslie and Kevin. They explored abandoned buildings, examined ravines and dirt trails, thoroughly checked every accessible spot. However, despite these efforts, they found no leads or evidence regarding Leslie and Kevin's whereabouts. Officers spoke with neighbors and local residents to see if anyone had heard anything unusual, like screams or strange noises. However, everyone reported that the night had been quiet. There were no witnesses and no physical evidence, leaving Leslie and Kevin's sudden disappearance completely baffling. The families took action, distributed missing persons posters throughout the town and nearby areas. They pursued every lead, searched for any information that might provide a clue. Their relentless efforts drew the attention of local media. The story started to appear in newspapers and on television. As awareness of the disappearance spread in the region, public pressure intensified, leaving law enforcement with no time to waste. Each day, the family's worry grew stronger. They found it hard to believe that their loved ones would just leave without explanation. They struggled to accept the possibility that Leslie and Kevin might not come back. Investigators kept gathering bits of information, minor details, witness statements, and strange rumors, but no clear answers surfaced. At that moment, no one could have foreseen how complicated the case would turn out to be. 12 hours after Leslie and Kevin were last seen, Leslie's phone showed activity in Niort. The police quickly sent a team to investigate the area. They searched nearby neighborhoods, spoke with local residents, and looked into possible routes Leslie and Kevin might have taken. However, no one reported seeing them. There was no sign of them or their belongings. 3 days later, Kevin's phone signaled a location in Fouras, a coastal town more than 50 miles away from their last known location. This raised alarm that the phones might have been moved by someone else. Authorities then began another search in Fouras, interviewing locals and searching the area. But again, they found nothing. After that, both phones stopped functioning, making it even more difficult for the police to track Leslie and Kevin's movements. A significant development in the case occurred on December 8th, when an employee at a waste processing facility contacted the police after discovering personal items in a clothing bin at the Le Relais Association in Puyrevaux. The items included Kevin's travel pass, the clothes and work tools, as well as the makeup bag. Investigators quickly arrived at the scene to collect the evidence for analysis. Both families confirmed that the items were indeed Leslie's and Kevin's. This find dramatically changed the course of the investigation. The initial theory that the couple had left voluntarily was no longer plausible, as it was evident they would not have discarded such personal belongings without a good reason. Investigators now suspected a criminal case. By mid-December 2022, the investigation took a new direction. Police began to focus on Tom Trulé, who had offered them his house and was one of the last people to see them alive. He was questioned several times to clarify the events of that night. Tom initially claimed that he left for a party on the evening of November 25th and did not return until early the next morning. However, geolocation data from his phone revealed that he had stayed in Prague the entire night. This information raised significant concerns for the investigators. Additionally, the police obtained message logs between Tom and Leslie. In a text sent at 2:53 a.m., Leslie mentioned that she wasn't feeling well after taking a substance Tom had given her. This message became crucial evidence, as Tom had never mentioned this incident before. Tom was arrested on February 28, 2023, after authorities suspected he played a significant role in the disappearance of Leslie and Kevin. In March 2023, investigators soon expanded their focus to include Tom's close friends, Nathan Badji, 22, and Enzo Chalat, 23, who were also taken into custody. Both men lived near where Leslie and Kevin's belongings were found, raising suspicions about their knowledge of the situation. During questioning, it became evident that Nathan and Enzo had strong ties to Tom and had been in the vicinity of Prague on the night the couple went missing. Investigators believed that they might have been involved in a coordinated effort, making it less likely that the incident was spontaneous. April 12, 2023, authorities arrested Stephen Mathieu, a fourth suspect and acquaintance of the group. He was arrested at a hotel in Le Havre, where he was a night watchman. He admitted that he had gone to La Rochelle to support his friend Nathan Badji and had met Tom Trulé on the sidelines of a techno party. The following day, he and Nathan Badji are said to have gone to a bricolage store to buy 2 bags of quicklime, a shovel, and rat poison. Phone records showed that the 2 men were in Prague when they apparently returned to Tom Trulé's house, where the pair were killed. According to Tom Trulé and Michael Zadi, this was to clean up the crime scene. That same day, Michael Zadi was arrested and detained. He is being investigated for assassination. The 3 previous suspects had been friends with Tom and were also familiar with Leslie and Kevin. This led to the theory that the crime was planned and possibly committed by a group rather than just one person. During questioning, Tom revealed that he once had feelings for Leslie. He said he had always liked her, but she only viewed him as a friend. When Leslie began dating Kevin, Tom felt rejected and humiliated. Investigators believed this emotional turmoil could have motivated the crime, suggesting it stemmed from a personal grudge that turned into a desire for revenge. Additionally, financial factors may have played a role. A close friend of Kevin's family told police that Kevin had €10,000 in cash, which he intended to use to buy a car. Tom knew about this money, and investigators thought it might have influenced his actions. During questioning, Tom alleged that Kevin was involved in selling illegal and owed him a lot of money. Kevin's family strongly denied these claims, asserting that Tom was trying to damage Kevin's reputation and deflect blame. With each round of questioning, the case became more complicated. Law enforcement was convinced that Leslie and Kevin's disappearance was not accidental. The evidence increasingly indicated a planned abduction, with each individual having a specific role in the events. After the arrests, thorough interrogations allowed authorities to piece together the events of that night. They discovered how Leslie and Kevin were taken and what transpired in the hours that followed. Tom Trulé was a key figure in the incident. He coordinated the group's actions and initiated the attack. Leslie and Kevin returned to Tom's house after visiting Nicholas. Although Tom was supposed to be at a party, he was actually at home. Later, a vehicle arrived at Tom's house with Nathan, Enzo, Stephen, and Stephen inside. They were all part of the plan and knew their roles. When Tom gave the signal, the rest of the group entered the house. They were equipped with hammers, metal rods, knives, even a sword. They barged in, while Leslie and Kevin were unsuspecting. Kevin was the first victim of the attack. Nathan and Tom hit him several times with hammers and metal tools. Leslie attempted to defend herself, but but Tom quickly subdued her. Both were restrained and forced into a vehicle, along with their dog, Onyx. The vehicle was taken to a remote area where Tom and his accomplices continued to assault Kevin. He suffered severe injuries from blunt object. According to the police, he died from both internal and external trauma. Leslie was kept separate from Kevin. Eventually, Tom killed her with a sword. Their bodies were discarded in different locations. Following the instructions of Tom Trullier, on March 3, 2023, Kevin Trompett's body was discovered in a forest in Puyrevaux, while Leslie Hurlbeck's body was found on March 4th in a forest in the commune of Verson. Both burial sites were in secluded, difficult-to-reach areas, which investigators recognized as an attempt to hide evidence. The whereabouts of Onyx are uncertain. The suspects claimed they released the dog on a nearby road, but police had doubts about this. In January 2023, the remains of a dog matching Onyx's description were discovered near Prague, but due to decomposition, it could not be definitively identified. Leslie's family believed that Onyx died alongside her. Medical examiners arrived at the scene shortly after the bodies were found. Their job was to determine the cause of death and the circumstances surrounding it. During the examination, they noted that both bodies were significantly decomposed, but there were clear signs of violent behavior. Experts observed several broken bones and numerous bruises. They believed these injuries were likely inflicted by heavy metal objects, such as rods, baseball bats, or metal hammers. The autopsy also revealed deep cuts that suggested the use of a large knife or machete. This evidence confirmed that Leslie and Kevin suffered a brutal attack and were killed in a particularly cruel manner. The medical examiners concluded that both victims died from excessive blood loss, resulting from a combination of internal bleeding and external wounds. Based on the timeline, experts estimated that they were killed on the night they disappeared. After the attack and killings, Tom and his associates took measures to eliminate any evidence. Tom returned to his home to destroy anything that could link him to the crime, while the rest of the group was responsible for getting rid of the couple's belongings. This is how their items ended up in Puyrevaux. The police based their investigation on several important points, including Tom's personal grudge against Leslie and a supposed argument with Kevin regarding a debt. The money Kevin had on him also seemed to play a role. Tom reportedly told investigators that the money was shared among the group. As new witness testimonies came in, conflicting statements arose. Some witnesses stated that everyone participated in attacking Kevin, while others insisted that only Tom and Nathan were involved. This inconsistency made the investigation more difficult. Medical reports indicated markings typical of being restrained. Scrapes on their wrists and forearms suggested that Leslie and Kevin may have been tied up or held against their will before they were killed. For the victims' families, these findings confirmed their deepest fears. For law enforcement, however, it provided important evidence of premeditated murder and the brutal treatment of the victims. Medical examiners carefully gathered all evidence to ensure there would be no doubt in court about who was guilty of the crime. Kevin's funeral was held on March 16th in Niort. It was attended not only by close family and friends, but also by neighbors, acquaintances, even strangers who had heard about the tragedy in the news. 2 days later, on March 18th, Leslie's memorial took place in La Rochelle. Both events drew many people wanting to support the families to honor the memories of Leslie and Kevin. Flowers were placed, candles were lit, words of sympathy were exchanged. At Kevin's funeral, his father, Guy Trompette, publicly blamed the 5 suspects for ruining 2 families, causing immense suffering to them. His heartfelt remarks struck a chord with those in attendance. Many people shared his grief and offered their condolences. Following the service, Guy organized a march to honor both his son and Leslie. The procession moved through the streets of Deux-Sèvres and nearby towns. In his speech, Guy expressed how losing a son creates a permanent wound, demanded that those responsible be brought to justice. Soon after, Guy found himself at the center of controversy. He was accused of attempting to hire someone to take revenge on the suspects for Kevin and Leslie's deaths. Investigators claimed Guy had spoken with a woman about the possibility of paying $110,000 to eliminate the suspects. However, he strongly denied these allegations, asserting that any such discussions may have taken place without his knowledge and that he was not involved in any malicious plans. Kevin's father, Guy Trompat, was sentenced on June 2, 2023 by the New York court to 18 months in prison, 6 of which were suspended, along with a 5-year ban on possessing weapons and the revocation of his hunting license for threatening to kill. A €100,000 bounty was allegedly promised to anyone who killed the suspects or their relatives. However, he was acquitted of inciting murder without supervision. Marie-Thérèse Garcia, the aunt of Leslie Hurlbeck, was indicted on May 25th on charges of kidnapping and confinement in an organized gang, murder, and possession of weapons, and was subsequently remanded in custody. She is accused of threatening individuals involved in the disappearance of Leslie and Kevin. Investigators from the Versailles Crime Squad have linked this case to that of Corinne, whose body was found decapitated and dismembered in an iron chest. Marie-Thérèse Garcia was identified as a potential suspect in that murder, which took place in the 1980s. She was arrested for the crime in 2007 following accusations from her daughter, arrested and charged 2 months later. Marie-Thérèse Garcia is currently in pretrial detention and maintains her innocence. She was reinterrogated by the investigating judge on August 11th. Tom Trouillet and his associates, Nathan Baji, Enzo Chala, Steven Mathieu, Mikkel Zadi, were in custody while waiting for their trial. For the families of Leslie and Kevin, these court proceedings offered a chance to seek answers and achieve justice. During this time, the families focused on keeping Leslie and Kevin's memories alive by sharing stories about Leslie's ambitions for her business and Kevin's goal of completing his van renovation. Ahead lay the most crucial phase, the trial. Both families and the public anticipated this event as the pivotal moment that could bring closure to their story. In early 2025, the 5 accused, Tom, Nathan, Enzo, Steven, and Michael, faced court. They were charged with kidnapping, homicide, and hiding the bodies. Each remained in custody, awaiting the final verdict. The trial is ongoing, complicated by the defendants' partial denials of guilt and conflicting testimonies, making the court's work difficult. In France, aggravated homicide, especially when involving kidnapping and body concealment, carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. Under French law, life imprisonment means the convicted person may apply for parole no sooner than 30 years. At the time of the trial, prosecutors were demanding the maximum sentences, life imprisonment for all 5, emphasizing the severity of their crimes. The court will issue a final ruling after thoroughly reviewing all evidence, witness statements, and expert reports. Meanwhile, Leslie and Kevin's families continue to wait for the verdict. The trial's outcome remains unconfirmed as of March 2025, with proceedings ongoing. Luisa Fernanda Garces Perez was born in Villa Maria. Luisa had a younger brother who was 2 years her junior. The siblings were very close, communicated well, and supported each other from a young age. Their father, Giovanni Garces, frequently worked long hours in warehouses, often taking night shifts to provide for the family. He often came home early in the morning, slept until the evening, and then returned to work. Despite the exhausting nature of his job, Giovanni always made time for his family. Luisa's mother primarily focused on managing the household and caring for her children instead of working outside the home. The grandparents, particularly on the father's side, played a significant role in their lives. Since they lived nearby, the children frequently visited and often stayed overnight. People who knew Luisa well described her as kind, intelligent, and lively. She was dedicated and responsible in her studies, earning good grades in all her subjects. Luisa was convinced that her academic success would lead to a brighter future and a more comfortable life than her parents had. Luisa was very sociable and had formed strong friendships with her classmates. They spent a lot of time together, studying and enjoying their free time. The group had always been close. However, in January 2014, things started to change. Many people noticed that Luisa began to distance herself from her friends. She went from being active and friendly to feeling irritated, even aggressive. It seemed like she was constantly looking for reasons to argue. Some thought this behavior was just a typical part of her teenage years. However, her conflicts with classmates increased, and she started to challenge her teacher's authority, creating many problems in her class. This was a sharp contrast to her previous compliant behavior. In July 2014, the school administration reached out to Luisa's family to recommend her removal from the school because of her disruptive behavior and the negative impact she was having on her classmates. Luisa, who had previously been a dedicated student, started to struggle in most subjects and underwent significant changes in her behavior. Her family attempted to communicate with her to understand what was happening, but Luisa remained distant and emotionally unavailable, unwilling to talk or share the reasons for her sudden transformation. Luisa's father was very worried. He tried several times to talk to her openly to figure out what was going on. He couldn't help but remember his kind and cheerful daughter, who now seemed so serious and rarely smiled. Even his father, who was once very close to her, couldn't reach her. She stubbornly refused to open up. Ultimately, Giovanni had to accept that this behavior was simply a part of her adolescence and hormonal changes. By August 2014, her parents had been divorced for 8 months. The primary issue in their marriage was her mother's struggle with alcohol. Her father also suspected that her mother was unfaithful and was often drunk, acted irresponsibly towards their children. As a result, after the divorce, Giovanni took responsibility for their daughter Luisa and her younger brother, raising them as a single father while their mother moved to another city to start a new life. Giovanni was concerned when the situation did not improve, so he thought a change of scenery might help. He contacted his sister, Maria, who lived in a nearby city. Maria agreed to take Luisa in for a while. At first, she frequently called Giovanni to report that Luisa was doing well and her behavior had improved a bit. However, once Luisa settled into the new environment, she became more withdrawn and aggressive again. Suspecting something was wrong, Maria reached out to social services for help. A psychologist assessed Luisa and later informed Maria of distressing news. He believed the girl's mental state suggested she might have been abused. Maria was taken aback and immediately called Giovanni to share this information. Giovanni was shocked by the news from the social worker. Although he did not want to believe that his daughter could be a victim of abuse, he recognized that her behavior aligned with signs of such trauma. Luisa's mother remained calm and reserved, but Giovanni was deeply worried about his daughter. He wanted to understand how this could happen and who might be involved. Now, he felt compelled to investigate whether the social worker's claim was true. Initially, he spoke with his sister and concluded that he needed to have a direct conversation with his daughter. After a short time, on August 19, 2014, Luisa came back to her father. They faced a tough discussion. Giovanni chose to be straightforward and immediately asked if she had been abused. Luisa could not speak and started to cry, which made her father realize the truth. All of the hurt, anger, and frustration that Luisa had been carrying came pouring out. She didn't share every detail, but according to Luisa, at the end of January 2014, when her father left for his night shift again, a friend of her mother came to visit. The two women began to drink together. Soon after, a man whom Luisa had never met arrived. He brought more alcohol and acted as if he were familiar with everyone. They welcomed him joyfully. Soon, they were all drinking together. When the alcohol was gone, two women fell asleep on the sofas, having consumed too much, while the stranger remained upright, noticeably less intoxicated than the others. He turned to Luisa and her brother, suggested they go to a nearby tent to eat hot dogs. They were easily convinced and happily followed the man to the closest eatery. They trusted him because they had seen their mother speak to him calmly and openly. After enjoying their hot dogs, they returned home. Two women were still asleep on the sofas. Since it was late in the evening, the children were also ready for bed. As soon as they got back inside, they went straight to their bedroom. Almost immediately, the man walked into the room. He offered Luisa's brother 50,000 Colombian pesos, which was a day's wages at that time, and a tempting offer for the young boy, told him to go to bed with his mother. Not realizing the man's true intentions, Luisa's brother took the money and followed his instructions to leave the room. The man then warned him not to come back for any reason. Luckily, Luisa's brother found it difficult to sleep. A few minutes later, Luisa's brother heard his sister crying softly from the children's bedroom. When he went back into the room, he was shocked to find the man in bed with Luisa. Confused and unsure of what to do, the boy hesitated. Luisa quickly panicked and chased him away. In an odd turn of events, their mother slept so deeply that she didn't wake up to check on the children. Despite the noise, Luisa asked her brother not to share what had happened because she was worried about the consequences. They both kept this painful secret for several months. Luisa's brother was still young and didn't fully grasp the situation. Luisa chose not to discuss any details because she was consumed by her own pain and anger. After this incident, Giovanni finally understood his daughter's behavior. He realized why she had become so withdrawn and aggressive during that time. Naturally, he was furious with his ex-wife for letting a stranger be in the house with their children while he was at work. Giovanni felt she had contributed to the attack on their daughter. He was terrified to think about what could have happened if his son hadn't woken up and scared away the attacker. The children had been at risk that whole evening. However, Giovanni quickly called his ex-wife to tell her what had happened and to blame her for it. She defended herself, saying she had no idea anything like this would happen. She stated that she didn't even know the man's name since he wasn't a close friend. The group had only met a few times. Giovanni realized that his ex-wife was merely covering for the criminal, which was an even greater blow to him. After recovering from the shock, Giovanni was determined to confront the situation. He took Luisa for a medical checkup to ensure her health and officially document the attack so they could report it to the police. He filed a report with the police and then returned home. Now, they awaited updates from law enforcement, hoping to see the perpetrator brought to justice soon. The next day, August 20th, 2014, Giovanni started his usual night shift at the warehouse. After these shifts, he was always exhausted and went straight to bed. That morning was no different. He saw his daughter doing her homework, and they exchanged a few words before he told her he was going to sleep since he needed to rest. This meant he would wake up around 7 or 8 p.m. During this time, Luisa was on her own, but her grandparents often visited her. She usually found activities to keep herself occupied and stayed at home. When Giovanni woke up, he noticed that Luisa was not there. He wasn't overly worried at first, thinking she might be at his parents' house nearby. Giovanni headed to work for his night shift and decided to call his father to check on Luisa. However, his father informed him that he had not seen her. She had visited them in the morning, but had returned home afterward. This news made Giovanni anxious. To avoid panicking, he reached out to friends and family who might know her whereabouts, but no one had seen her. Additionally, Luisa's brother spent the entire day with their grandfather, which increased their concern. Giovanni took a leave of absence from work and, along with his parents, started searching for his daughter. They were very concerned, believing that Luisa was still in danger. On August 21st, 2014, after a long night of searching without success, they returned to the police station to report their child's disappearance. As soon as they filed the report, a public announcement was made and many flyers were printed. Pictures of Luisa, along with her description and details about her disappearance, were distributed around the city to seek information. On the same day, witnesses reported seeing Luisa in various cities. Some said she was wandering the streets, while others claimed she was with a group of men. This news was concerning, but also offered a glimmer of hope. Sadly, subsequent searches turned up nothing. Giovanni's anxiety grew with each passing moment. He struggled to eat or sleep, consumed by worry for his daughter's safety. Law enforcement did not stay idle. As soon as they received the report, they started searching for Louisa right away. The detectives treated the situation with great seriousness, particularly because of the abuse allegation. It felt too coincidental. The day before the attack, the girl had gone to the hospital, where the abuse was confirmed. This led to concerns that the attacker might have tried to silence her to prevent her from testifying in court. But how could he have learned about her so quickly? Unfortunately, no one knew the identity or address of the man. There was very little information about the abuser. However, a few individuals could provide more insights. The police reached out to Louisa's mother's friend. She told the detectives that in early January, she and Louisa's mother had enjoyed some beers together after work. During their time together, she received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, she felt at ease upon recognizing the voice of a young hairdresser she had met about 7 years earlier. Based on their conversation, he expressed a desire to meet and talk with them, offering to bring alcohol with him. She readily accepted his suggestion. Louisa's mother's deception was uncovered when it was revealed that she had known the man for a long time. At that moment, the police came up to her. Louisa's mother admitted that the man was her ex-friend, who had been released from prison in early January 2014. She had visited him multiple times while he was in prison. When Louisa's father found out all the details, he was enraged and couldn't understand how she had let such a dangerous man approach her children. However, his main concern at that moment was finding out where Louisa was. Louisa's mother, who was still protecting the suspected, was brief and told the detectives that she didn't know his full name. Everyone who knew him referred to him as Peluco. When investigators sought more information from her, she became hostile and firmly refused to share any details about her personal life or history. Despite the fact that such information could assist in locating her daughter, it appeared that she was indifferent to the well-being of her 13-year-old girl. Unfortunately for police, neither woman was able to provide enough information to help find the man. Giovanni and his father were greatly affected by this setback, as they had been searching for a long time. To gather information, Louisa's grandfather disguised himself as a homeless man and wandered through the city's dangerous areas. Unfortunately, he did not manage to uncover any useful information. On August 26, 2014, a fisherman visited the police station to report a finding. That morning, he had discovered a body along the banks of the Corca River. When the investigators arrived at the scene, they found a dismembered body with parts scattered around, suggesting that wild animals had disturbed the remains. Initially, many of the body parts were missing, but they did find some legs that were tied together with shoelaces. All of these remains were inside a bag. Additionally, a strand of hair was found within the bag, and this limited evidence was carefully collected for identification. Reports of disappearances in the area were checked against recent appeals. The concerns raised by Giovanni about the missing girls were the most closely related. Clothes found on the body matched those of Louisa. DNA samples were taken from Louisa's father to compare with the remains. After 2 months, in October, the results came in. The human remains found by the riverbank were identified as belonging to Louisa. By this time, additional body parts had also been found. A thorough forensic examination revealed that Louisa died from a severe blow to the right side of her head. Her family was heartbroken upon hearing this news. The elderly grandfather expressed that this was the most tragic event he had ever faced in his long life. The investigation's findings were disheartening. Louisa's body showed no evidence of foreign DNA or biological fluids because of the effects of water, leaving uncertainty about whether she had been abused before her death. No fingerprints or other evidence suitable for examination were found on the bag, and the hair discovered on it belonged to Louisa. There were no signs pointing to a suspect. Additionally, investigators have not yet been able to determine the full name of the man who abused Louisa and is likely connected to her death. Louisa's grandfather took action in response to his granddaughter's death. He put up a black and white flag on the front of his house. He explained that the white color symbolizes his granddaughter's purity, while the black represents mourning. He vowed to keep the flag up until the people responsible for her death are apprehended. He continued his efforts even more. At the top of the house, he installed a cross with purple edges to symbolize his sorrow. The sides of the cross were decorated with green garlands, and the center featured red garlands. The green represented his hope that the police would catch the criminals, while the red symbolized the blood shed by his granddaughter. Detectives resumed interviewing the victims' family acquaintances individually. It was during this process that one of Luisa's friends provided crucial information. The schoolboy reported seeing Luisa on the day she went missing. The boy was aware that Giovanni had returned home from his night shift and was resting. At one point, Luisa expressed a desire to find her uncle, and he offered to assist her. They went out together to search for her uncle and made a stop at a hot dog stand. Luisa noted that it was the same place where she and her brother had been abducted by the abuser in January. After hearing the boy's statement, the police visited a hot dog stand and spoke with a seller. He was hesitant to cooperate, but recalled Luisa's visit from a few months ago. This witness described one of the men who visited the stand with 2 children late one evening in January. Interestingly, he remembered this incident because he had sold a motorcycle to that man and still had his phone number. He then shared this number with Luisa, who called it to arrange a meeting. According to the boy, all this happened about 20-30 minutes later. Therefore, he was happy for Luisa that she had found her uncle, and he went home. After that, Luisa was left alone, next to the tent, waiting for her uncle. After a while, the uncle drove up on a motorcycle. Luisa ran up to him and talked to him about something. After that, she got on the motorcycle, and both of them left in an unknown direction. According to the seller, a few days later, he saw a picture of Luisa in a report about her disappearance, but only now connected all these events. Investigators were amazed that so many people knew who they were talking about, but no one could even provide a name for the suspect. After the story of the classmate and the hot dog seller, there were even more questions. Why was Luisa searching for this man so much? Why did she call him uncle and communicate with him? Why did she leave with a dangerous man? It all sounded absurd. In any case, it was necessary to get the name of this person. The police returned to analyzing the information they had. Since Luisa's mother claimed to have visited this person in prison, it became possible to trace these visits. They decided to check this lead, but it took even longer to check the archives. In December 2014, detectives made an important discovery. Luisa's mother had visited Gabriel Jaime Marulanda Sepulveda, who was 43 years old at the time. Investigating Gabriel's background shed light on why witnesses claimed they didn't recognize him. Since 1995, he had a lengthy criminal history, including various offenses, the most severe being the murder of a student at Universidad Nacional de Bogotá. His record included robberies, assaults, domestic violence, illegal possession of weapons, and escaping from prison, along with several incidents where he was not convicted. Overall, he had been arrested 13 times and faced trial 8 times. He was released for the murder charge at the end of 2013. During this period, he had multiple relationships and 3 children. This information contradicted witness statements, leading to suspicions that they may have been intimidated or that Gabriel had misrepresented himself. When the photo of the suspect was shown to Luisa's brother, he instantly recognized him. The investigators also verified the suspect's connection to Gabriel by checking the phone number obtained from a hot dog seller. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to Luisa's murder. To investigate further, the authorities reviewed his phone records and tracked his geolocation, discovering that his mobile phone was located precisely at the site where Luisa's body was found. On August 21st, around 5:30 p.m., the day after her disappearance, he tried to dispose of the body at that location. Eventually, the police issued a warrant for Gabriel's arrest, but finding him proved to be more challenging than expected. There was very little information available about him. He couldn't be found at his known addresses, but it was known that he had been working as a helper in a coffee shop in the countryside. However, even there, the employers did not offer any useful information. Additionally, The phone number provided by the hot dog seller was no longer in service. Gabriel didn't have to wait long for his next legal trouble. In May 2015, he was arrested while attending a hearing for one of his previous offenses. 2 new charges were added: the abuse and murder of Luisa Fernanda Garces Perez. He could face a prison sentence ranging from 33 to 50 years. Unsurprisingly, Gabriel denied any responsibility for Luisa's death, which led to delays in the trial. The prosecution aimed to collect as much indirect evidence as possible, and a lawyer's involvement further contributed to the postponement. Overall, the hearing was delayed for 2 years, during which the defense tried to paint Gabriel as a victim of police misconduct. There was no concrete evidence linking him to the murder, so the lawyers argued that he was a scapegoat targeted by the police due to a lack of other suspects. Gabriel showed no remorse for his actions. Instead of confessing, he claimed he wasn't in town when Luisa went missing. He also described Luisa's mother as an escort whose services he frequently used, stating this was the reason for his visit to her house in January 2014 while denying any wrongdoing. A crucial witness for the prosecution was a hot dog vendor who had observed Gabriel leaving with Luisa on a motorcycle. Unfortunately, the hot dog vendor did not show up in court. His mother claimed he had found a new job and moved away, but many suspected this was a result of pressure and threats from Gabriel. He was unwilling to testify against Gabriel. The police later learned that he had previously been incarcerated and was a former cellmate of Gabriel, which meant he was aware of Gabriel's violent nature and was afraid for his safety. The hearings started with the prosecutor claiming that Gabriel misled and took Luisa to the riverbank. Gabriel was upset with her when he discovered she was with her father. Giovanni alerted the police. He then hit her on the head, tied her legs with shoelaces, and threw her into the water before escaping. Evidence included witness testimonies and mobile phone records. Ultimately, Gabriel Jaime Marulanda Sepulveda was sentenced to between 25 and 41 years in prison for Luisa's murder and 9 years for the abuse, for a total of 34 to 50 years. Despite the fact that Luisa's family achieved justice, many questions remained unanswered. The criminal never confessed why Louise called him uncle, why she met with him willingly, or why she left with him on a motorcycle. The police believed that Luisa wanted to meet with him to inform him that she had reported him to the authorities and that she probably did not fully realize how dangerous the situation was. After these events, Giovanni still believed that not all perpetrators were held accountable for their crimes. He blamed his ex-wife for the misadventures his daughter had gone through, as well as for her death. However, it seemed that the woman was not overly troubled by all of this. Although many condemned the mother for her carelessness, which cost her daughter dearly, she was never held accountable.